Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Wasn't Alone? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. All Might has been an inspiration for countless heroes, so I find it somewhat ironic that my descent into villainy began with him as well. Izuku wasn't surprised when All Might told him that he couldn't become a hero. After all, people had been telling him to give up on his dreams since he was 5. Still, hearing those words from All Might, of all people, felt like a sucker punch. All Might was his idol, his hero, a larger-than-life presence whose eternal optimism and unshakable smile had gotten Izuku through the darkest points in his life. And now here he was, telling Izuku to give up on his dream. All Might continued speaking, trying to soften the blow by giving examples of other careers that Izuku could try if he wanted to help people, but Izuku barely even heard him. Eventually, All Might realized that his words weren't helping, so he stopped. He picked up the bottled sludge villain, which must have fallen out of his pocket at some point, and walked away, with one final glance back at Izuku. It's good to have dreams, young man, but you have to make sure that they are realistic. He then closed the door, leaving Izuku alone on the rooftop. Once All Might was out of sight, Izuku crumpled to his knees. You knew this would happen. Everyone's already told you it's impossible, so why would All Might say anything different? It's not like he could magically give you a quirk. Izuku sat there for a few minutes, trapped in his thoughts, before standing up and dusting himself off. He realized it was starting to get late, and he'd need to hurry home to keep his mom from worrying about him too much. His thoughts continued as he walked home. Well, if I needed another sign that I can't be a hero, that was it. Time to focus on a realistic future. Izuku opened his front door to find his mom nervously sitting on the couch, practically staring at the door. Izuku, there you are you okay? You're home so late and you look upset about something. Is everything all right? She hurried over to him and put her hands on his shoulders reassuringly. Izuku forced a weak smile. I'm all right, Mom. I just did some thinking today, and I realize it's time for me to accept that I'm not going to become a hero. He noticed a brief expression of relief on his mom's face, though she quickly tried to hide it. Are you sure, Izuku? I know how much this dream has meant to you. He nodded, but as strong as he was trying to be, he couldn't stop a few tears from leaking out of his eyes. I'm sure. I'm not giving up on my dream completely. I'm still going to help people, but I need to be realistic about it. Izuku noticed that his mom had started crying too. Well, if you're sure, sweetie. If you need any help from me, I'm here for you. Okay? He nodded again. The next few weeks were a blur. Once Kaken realized that Izuku had given up on trying to be a hero, he started to go easier on him, but Izuku was too busy to pay him much mind anyway. He was too focused on trying to figure out what to do with his life. I've always wanted to help people, but what's a way of doing that I can actually manage? What am I good at? Well, I've always liked watching heroes, analyzing their quirks, and figuring out what they're capable of. There are jobs for that. Every news agency worth its salt has at least one hero analyst on its staff. That could be fun. Maybe I could even work with a hero directly. Plenty of heroes have an assistant who figures out any quirks they come across. Yeah. Even if I can't become a hero myself, I could still help them. So that's an end goal, but what's the next step? What school should I apply for to prepare for this? There's only one choice. One night, while he was eating dinner, Izuku snapped out of his musings long enough to tell his plan to his mom. I'm going to try to go to U.A's General Studies course. Even if I can't be a hero, I want to help them. Izuku's eyes lit up as he made that declaration, and he could see his mom's face light up as well, as she saw that he had a new, safer, plan for his future. Izuku spent the remaining months until the entrance exam studying harder than he ever had before. He had always made good enough grades, but UA was incredibly prestigious, so he wasn't about to take any chances. He also doubled down on his study of heroes, because in addition to the normal written exam, there was a hero exam, testing knowledge of things like quirk science and hero history. Izuku finished writing Hero Notebook number 13, the one with All Might's signature, as well as starting and finishing 3 more notebooks. He ended up analyzing the quirks of countless pro-heroes and looking into a few more disturbing developments in the hero world, like the appearance of a hero killer named Stain. Between his regular studying and hero research, Izuku frequently studied late into the night, until his mom would have to practically force him to go to bed. He also started working out, partly to give himself something to do, but also because some of the careers he was planning on entering would require him to be in shape. Finally, the day of the exam arrived. Izuku prepared quickly, gave his mom a quick hug as she fretted over him, and went off to UA. He took the train there and stood right outside the main gate for a moment, just taking in the view of the school. This is it. Even if it's just the general studies course, going to UA has always been my dream. It's time to make it a reality. I can do this. Izuku took in a deep breath and walked in. Izuku was immediately reminded why he had wanted to go to UA so badly, as Present Mike was proctoring their exam. He could barely contain his excitement at being in the same room as one of the most charismatic pro-heroes in Japan. Present Mike gave a short speech, telling them all to go plus ultra, and then the exams began. The general exam was challenging, but Izuku didn't feel overwhelmed by it. His months of studying were paying off, and the general exam was no harder than he had expected. The section on heroes, on the other hand, was even easier. It seemed that, in his enthusiasm for heroes, Izuku had over-prepared for this section. He answered his final question, waited for time to end, and headed home. His mom was waiting for him in the living room when he got home. "How did it go, Izuku?" Izuku smiled wide. "I think it went well. I might have even over-prepared for the hero portion of the exam." His mom walked over to him. "I just wanted to say, I'm really proud of you. I know this past year has been hard for you, having to give up on becoming a hero, but you did a great job getting through it. And here you are, doing everything you can to still make your dreams come true. I can't wait to see what you'll do next." Tears started to roll down her cheeks as she spoke, and Izuku felt himself start to cry as well. "Thank you. I'll make you proud." A week later, Izuku was watching a hero fight on his laptop when his mom burst into his room holding an envelope. "Izuku, your letter from UA came in." Izuku practically jumped out of his seat. Taking the envelope from his mom, he moved over to the living room and sat down on the couch, gingerly placing his hand on the UA seal. As confident as Izuku felt about the entrance exam, he still felt a pit of nervousness in his stomach as he stared at the envelope. "This is it. This is U.A." Izuku swallowed his nervousness, tore open the letter, and began to read it out loud. "Dear Midoriya Izuku, I'm sure you're nervous about the results of your exam, so I'll skip the pleasantries and just say, congratulations. The General Studies course of UA gladly accepts your application. With a more than satisfactory academic record and the highest score in the hero section of the entrance exam, we are excited to see what you do next. Thank you for choosing U.A, and we look forward to seeing you this spring. Plus Ultra. Principal Nizu." Izuku wasn't able to make it through the whole letter in one attempt, as he started crying tears of joy as early as congratulations. His mom started crying as well, so they sat on the couch and cried together. Izuku read the letter to himself over and over again, relieved that he had managed to salvage his dream. A few days later, Izuku was told to stay after class so that his teacher could congratulate him and Kaken on getting into UA. Even though Izuku was just in general studies, it was incredible that their school had managed to get 2 students into UA this year. Izuku accepted his teacher's praise quietly, feeling Kaken's glare the entire time. After they were dismissed, Kaken grabbed Izuku by the arm and pulled him into an alley by the school. "What the fuck, Deku? This was supposed to be my moment. I was supposed to be the only one from our shitty middle school to make it into UA." He shoved Izuku into the wall. "Now I've got a quirkless nerd tailing me, just like always." Izuku stared at him, trying to fight back his fear. "I'm not trying to steal your glory. I know I can't hope to stand in the same ring as you. He somehow found the courage to continue, grabbing the arm Kaken was using to pin him to the wall as he glared at the other boy. "I'm following my dream. And even you can't stop me. This is it, Tenya." The UA entrance exam. Tenya had been preparing for this day for the past year, studying even harder than he normally would, and training his body and Quirk to their limits. He was somewhat ashamed that he had been unable to pass the recommendation exam, but this was no time to be dwelling on past failures. It was time for him to get into UA and make his family proud. Not that they weren't already proud of his achievements, of course. He knew that they were. His brother Tensei had even taken the day off to drive him to the exam and provide some moral support. Noticing how deep in thought Tenya was, Tensei gave him a warm smile. "How you feeling? Nerves setting in?" Tenya shook his head. "Given UA's prestige, I do feel slightly nervous about this exam, but more than that I feel excited to show what I have learned." "What you have taught me?" Tensei chuckled at that. "Don't give me too much credit. Today's about you and what you've accomplished. Good luck out there." "Calm down. I know this is a lot, but you can do this." Ochako tried to reassure herself as she got off the train. She had studied, she was in good shape, and her Quirk was pretty useful. She could do this. She had to. She had done the math. Becoming a hero and getting signed by a good agency was the best and fastest way for her to help her parents. And not only was UA the best hero school in Japan, but it was also the only one she could afford. UA made its money from alumni donations and government grants, which meant that tuition was free. The only barrier to entry was the entrance exam. Ochako looked around at all the other students heading towards UA, but she felt too nervous about the upcoming trials to try to get to know them. And besides, she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong here. This was a fancy school for rich people with flashy quirks. And she was just her. Poor, with a quirk that was easy to miss. She quickly tried to clear her mind of those thoughts. "Stop that. You can do this, Ochako. You've got to." Ochako found where her exam was going to be and took a seat. A hero named Present Mike explained how the exam would work, and his enthusiasm was enough to let Ochako bury some of her doubts. First, they would all take a written exam to see where they were academically, and then they would have a physical exam where they would use their quirks to fight robots. Depending on the robot, they would be worth 1, 2, or 3 points. A boy with glasses a few rows in front of her asked a question, saying that the information packet said there were 4 types of robots, and that if it was a mistake, that would be shameful for a school as famous as UA. Present Mike told the boy to calm down, and explained that the 4th robot was the 0-pointer. This was an especially dangerous robot worth 0 points, so it was recommended that they run away from it. Then the written test began. Ochako had never struggled with school, but she wasn't a top student either. While she felt like she had passed, she knew it wouldn't give her much of a buffer for the physical exam. She would need to do her best if she wanted to get in. "This is it. You can do this." The exam began suddenly and without fanfare. The doors opened, Present Mike told them it had started, and everyone bolted to get going. Ochako jumped and activated her quirk on herself, flying over the other students' heads to reach the front of the crowd. She turned a corner to find a small group of robots and quickly tapped each of them, giving them a push into the air. Once they were high up enough, she released her quirk, and they shattered onto the ground. She gave a smile as she looked back at her handiwork. "All right, 6 points. It's a good start." As the exam progressed, Ochako collected 25 points and a growing stomachache from using her quirk. Then she heard something huge moving in her direction. She turned towards the sound and saw the 0-pointer staring her down. The presentation hadn't done this robot justice. It dwarfed the buildings around it. It was an unstoppable kaiju of a machine. Every student who saw it was filled with the same thought. So, Ochako ran, until the robot smashed a nearby building with its arm, causing rubble to slam into her leg, pinning her to the ground. She felt her leg break under the impact and cried out in pain. It would be easy to move the rubble with her quirk, but there was no way she could outrun the robot with a broken leg. Panic began to set in. No. I can't get away. What was I thinking, taking this exam? I can't do this. That's when Ochako saw another student running towards her. Tenya didn't have a plan. When the 0-pointer appeared, he had originally planned to run away from it. After all, it was worth 0 points, and he needed to get as many points as he could before time ran out if we wanted to pass. So, he ran away from it looking for any easier robots he could pick off as he did. Then he heard a girl scream behind him. He looked back to see someone stuck under the rubble, in the 0-point robot's path. He turned away, reassuring himself that a prestigious school like UA wouldn't let any harm come to a student, but then he stopped himself. That is no way for a hero to think. I need to treat this exercise as if it were real life, or I will not be able to do what is necessary when I become a pro hero. My brother would go back for that girl, so I will as well. He turned around and ran back toward the 0-pointer. The girl reached behind her and shoved the rubble off of her leg as Tenya reached her. He scooped her up into his arms and quickly turned away from the robot. Recipro burst. The engines on Tenya's legs burst to life, sending him forward at superhuman speed. Come on, Tenya. You can do this. Then another swing from the 0-pointer caused a massive pile of rubble to fall into their path. Tenya tried to slow himself down by turning off his engines to avoid slamming into it, but he knew it wouldn't be enough and that the impact was going to hurt. I suppose that running in without any sort of plan was a rather foolish decision. I hope that she does not have to pay for it. Ochako knew that, at the speed that he was going, the boy wouldn't be able to avoid the rubble in front of them, so she shouted jump as she activated her quirk on the both of them. She was already starting to feel queasy, and she knew this would put her past her limit, but she had to try. Luckily, he trusted her enough to listen to her, and the momentum carried them both forwards and upwards, over the pile of rubble and rising further. They crested the top of a building, and Ochako released her quirk, causing them both to topple onto the building's roof. She felt her stomach start to rise, and she quickly turned to vomit over the side. As he recovered from the quick fall, Tenya analyzed his situation. It had been close, and he would not have made it without the girl's help, but it had been a successful rescue. His engines were burnt out from using reciproburst and the girl was vomiting off the side of the building, but they had made it away from the 0-point robot. He breathed in a deep sigh of relief. Thank you for your assistance. I suppose next time I should not run into a situation that is beyond my ability to handle. As Present Mike called for the end of the exercise, Tenya walked over to the girl. Are you all right? She turned towards him and gave a shaky thumbs up. I suppose we should head down. I noticed a stairwell right there. She nodded weakly as he helped her up. Thanks for saving me back there. What's your name, by the way? I'm Uraraka Ochako. I'm Iida Tenya. And thank you as well. I would not have escaped the robot without your aid. The two of them didn't talk much more as Tenya helped her down the stairs. Eventually, they made their way to the ground and found Recovery Girl healing everyone who needed it. After passing off Uraraka to her, Tenya said goodbye and took his leave. Tenya found his brother waiting for him outside the exam space. Tensei gave him a wide grin and a pat on the back. Since I'm a pro hero, they let me into the observation room. I watched your exam, and I'm so proud of you. Tenya nodded. Well, all of the advice and training you gave me paid off. Those robots were easier to deal with than I had been expecting. That got a laugh out of Tensei. That's not what I meant. You went back for that girl when the 0-pointer attacked. Instead of just going for points, you acted like a real hero. Tenya looked at him a little surprised. You don't think it was reckless of me to engage an enemy that was so far beyond my ability? His older brother ruffled his hair. Sometimes, picking a fight you can't win to save a person who needs help is exactly what heroes are supposed to. Tenya nodded again, somewhat confused, but trusting that his brother knew what he was talking about. I see. I will keep that in mind. Tensei kept walking. Now, let me get you back home, so you can tell Mom and Dad all about how well you did today. A few weeks later, Ochako was back in Muzadafu, looking at apartments with her parents. She had somehow made it into UA, which she still had difficulty believing, but that success brought its own difficulties. Her parents had decided it would be easier for her to live near the school than for her to have to take the train every day. She was looking out over the balcony when her dad joined her. Nice view, huh? What do you think of this apartment? She looked back at him. It looks good. Is the price all right? He smiled and pulled her into a hug. It's not too expensive. And besides, no price is too high for helping our baby girl achieve her dream. Ochako hugged him back, tears threatening to escape her eyes. Thanks, Dad. I promise I'll make you proud. You already do, Ochako. You already do. Izuku was surprised he had managed to get any sleep the night before. He had thought he would be far too excited about starting at UA to even sleep a wink. But he must have fallen asleep at some point, because his alarm woke him up for his first day of school. He put his uniform on, grabbed a quick breakfast, and was about to leave when he noticed his mom walking into the living room. "Good morning, Ma. You're up early today." She smiled and walked over to Izuku to give him a hug. "As if I would miss my young man heading off for his first day of high school. How are you feeling?" Izuku smiled and returned his mom's hug. "Excited, nervous, and glad to have someone looking out for me." His mom walked with him to the ground floor of the apartment and waved from the doorway as he headed to school. "Good luck. Have fun. Stay safe." Hitoshi woke up again, but this time his alarm was going off, so he didn't try to go back to sleep. He sat up in bed for a few minutes, giving his cat, who had clambered into his lap, a quick pet as he slowly woke himself up. "Got a big day ahead of me, huh, Checkers? Wish me luck." After gently removing Checkers, he got ready quietly, not wanting to wake Mrs. Egamura, and slipped out of the house. First day at UA. Today gets me one small step closer to my dream. I just need to keep my head down until the sports festival and then blow them all away. Walking onto the grounds of Izuku could hardly believe he wasn't dreaming. "I'm a student at UA. Not in the hero course, but still." He couldn't wait to see all of the heroes who worked there. He made his way to his classroom, looking in awe at everything and everyone, the fact that he didn't notice any heroes on his way to class not dampening his spirits in the slightest. He entered his classroom a few minutes before the bell rang. A few of his classmates had already started getting to know each other, but Izuku didn't feel up to that, so he quietly took a seat near the back, in front of a purple-haired kid who looked like he hadn't slept much the night before. Their teacher came in, introduced herself as Uchiyama Hiroko, and gave a brief overview of the purpose of the General Studies course. They then left their bags in the classroom and were all led outside for the opening ceremony. All the heroes working at UA were there. Izuku saw Ectoplasm, Snipe, Midnight, Cementos, Vlad King. How many heroes does UA have? Principal Nizu walked up onto the stage and began to speak. He mentioned how this was going to be a very special year because UA had just hired a new teacher whom he was sure everyone would be very excited for. Immediately Izuku started to theorize who this surprise teacher might be. "I haven't heard anything on the news about UA taking in a new teacher, so it probably isn't someone too famous. I doubt they could have kept too impressive a hire under wraps. But he also made it sound like we'd all know who this teacher was, so it must be someone fairly popular. Maybe a rising star like Kamui Woods?" His train of thought was interrupted as Nizu finished his introduction, and the new teacher leaped from the roof of UA and onto the stage wearing his classic Silver Age costume. It was All Might. "No way. All Might is teaching at UA?" All Might smiled at the shocked students and began to speak. "Good morning, newbies. It feels so good to be back at my alma mater. I have a few words to say to kick off the year. To those of you in the hero course, get ready. These next 3 years will push you to every limit you have and past them. But if you stay strong, this school will mold you into the best heroes you can be, heroes who will be responsible for the future of the world. That being said, don't look down on the students in the other courses. Without the jobs they're training for, our work as heroes would be nearly impossible. And to you in those other courses, I have this to say. Take pride in what you're doing. It might not be as flashy as hero work, but don't let anyone tell you that it's any less important. And to all of you, I have one last thing to say. You may have heard these words before, but I want you to make them the driving force of your time here. Go beyond. Plus ultra." All of the students around Izuku began to cheer in excitement at the prospect of having All Might as a teacher. And if Izuku hadn't met the symbol of peace before, he probably would have had the same reaction. But as it was, he was a little surprised by his reaction to seeing All Might again. There was still awe, but another feeling broke through. Anger? Bitterness? He wasn't sure. Eventually, Principal Nizu got everyone to calm down and sent them off to lunch. Izuku looked around the cafeteria after grabbing his food, suddenly feeling more nervous than he had at any point in the day. No one had ever wanted to be his friend before, and he didn't see any reason that would change now. Here we go. Time to try my best. He stared at where his classmates were already seated, already forming friend groups, and already in excited conversation. He didn't feel brave enough to sit with anyone that social. Then he noticed the tired boy from his class eating lunch quietly by himself. He doesn't look too scary. I can start by making one friend. Hitoshi wasn't in a hurry to make friends. After all, if his plan worked, he wouldn't be in general studies for long, so any friendships he made would go to waste. Besides, no one had ever wanted to be his friend before, and he didn't see any reason that would change now. "Excuse me, can I sit here?" Hitoshi glanced up and saw the green-haired boy from his class standing by the chair across from him. He shrugged. He wasn't here to make friends, but he wasn't planning on being a jerk either. The boy nodded in thanks and sat down. "I'm Midoriya Izuku." "Shinso Hitoshi." That was all they said for the next few minutes, as quietly eating with someone else seemed to be enough socialization for the both of them. But then Midoriya felt the need to make small talk and asked the question that Hitoshi had been dreading. "So, what's your quirk?" Hitoshi visibly grimaced. "Here we go, Hitoshi. Get ready to scare everyone away again." Midoriya must have noticed his reaction because he quickly and nervously interjected. "It's okay if you don't want to answer. I'm actually quirkless, so I understand not being excited to talk about your quirk." Hitoshi looked at him quizzically. "I thought there weren't any quirkless students at UA." Midoriya chuckled at that. Actually, that statistic is just referring to the hero course. The percentage of quirkless students in the other courses is actually close to the percentage of quirkless people in our general demographic, which is to say, not many, but there are still a couple. Okay, this guy is weird, but at least it's in a friendly way. "How do you know all of this?" Midoriya looked a little embarrassed. "I've always been really interested in heroes and quirks. Maybe it's because I don't have a quirk, but I always wanted to be a hero. Even though I know I can't be one, I still want to help them." Listening to Midoriya's excited declaration made a smile spread across Hitoshi's face. "Don't be embarrassed, man. You can't help what your heart longs for. As for me, I haven't given up on becoming a hero just yet." Midoriya practically beamed at him. "Really? You're going to try to break into the hero course by impressing UA at the sports festival, right? What's your plan? You'll need something really impressive up your sleeve to transfer into the hero course. Well, here it goes." Midoriya seems nice, so hopefully he'll take this well, but he'd find out eventually anyway. "My quirk lets me mind control anyone who responds to me. A villain quirk, if you will. It wasn't at all useful for fighting robots at the entrance exam, but I should be able to show it off when I'm up against some hero course brats." Midoriya didn't react in any of the ways Hitoshi had been expecting. He didn't look scared, he didn't make some excuse to leave the table, and he didn't cover his mouth in a panicked attempt to block Hitoshi's quirk. Surprisingly, Midoriya looked fascinated by what Hitoshi was saying, and even more surprisingly, he responded to him. "That's an incredible quirk. You'd definitely make a big impression at the sports festival if you were able to use it on your opponent in the tournament round. UA's a big school, so it makes sense that someone with a useful slipped through the cracks, but it was definitely a huge mistake on their part. You could be an incredible hero with that sort of quirk." Hitoshi just stared at Midoriya in shock. This wasn't the way he was prepared for the conversation to go. "So, you aren't scared of me? You don't think my quirk sounds like something a villain would have?" Midoriya thought for a moment before answering. "Sure, a villain would love to have a quirk like that, but it makes even more sense for a hero to use it. While it doesn't have any application for rescue work, you would be able to effortlessly capture any villain without a fight." "No way. This guy isn't afraid of me. He actually believes that I can be a hero. You'd probably want to be a dash." Midoriya's deep dive into the heroic uses of Hitoshi's quirk was suddenly interrupted by a shout from one of the nearby tables. "Fine. I'll sit somewhere else then." A pink-haired girl with way more energy than the two of them combined stood up angrily and walked over to their table, sitting down without asking if they were okay with it. Of course, neither Hitoshi nor Midoriya had the social confidence to tell her off. "Hi. I'm Hatsume." "Midoriya Izuku." "Shinso Hitoshi." She barely took a moment to register what they said before loudly asking, "Do you guys want to hear about my babies?" Midoriya nearly spat out his drink. "Your what?" Hitoshi spent the remainder of the lunch period trying to tune out Hatsume as she gave a complex description of all her inventions, or as she called them, her babies. He considered using his quirk to shut her up, but he decided against giving his classmates any reason to be afraid of him on the first day. The rest of Izuku's school day passed uneventfully. His remaining classes were normal subjects, and the teachers spent their periods introducing themselves and going over what to expect over the course of the semester. He went straight home after school, letting himself into his apartment quietly since his mom was still working. Izuku sat at the table, looking through the day's hero news until his mom finished working and came out excitedly to greet him. "Izuku, how was your first day?" Looked so happy for him. Izuku smiled at her and responded, "It went great. UA's just as cool as everyone says. Even cooler, actually. All Might's teaching there now. And I think I made some friends." Izuku's mom gave him a hug. "Well, I'm glad to hear it went great. Now, the Bakugos were kind enough to get groceries for us, so you don't need to make a trip to the store today. We're having katsudon tonight, and while I get it ready, I want you to tell me everything that happened today." So he did. Hitoshi slipped into his house quietly and was in the process of taking off his shoes when he heard a familiar voice. "You seem happy. How'd your first day go?" Hitoshi looked up into the wrinkled face and warm eyes of Mrs. Egamura, and once again felt those eyes staring into his soul. The sensation had scared him at first, but now that he knew there wasn't any malice behind it, it was comforting. "It went great. I made a friend today." "I wasn't expecting that." She reached up and ruffled his hair. "Well, isn't that something? Who is this new friend? You'll have to tell me all about them." So he did. "All right, newbies. For your first class of hero training, we'll be conducting mock battles. You'll be split into teams of 2 and paired up against other teams. Since there are only 19 of you, young Todoroki will be on his own. One team will be chosen as heroes and the other team villains. The villain team is tasked with defending a secret weapon hidden in their base. The hero team wins if they capture the villains or secure the weapon. The villain team wins if time runs out before either of those goals are accomplished. Now everyone give it your plus ultra." It was the second day of school, and Ochako was excited about a lot of things. She was excited to finally be able to wear her hero costume. She was excited to have a class taught by All Might. And she was excited that Iida was her teammate. That being said, she wasn't excited about her opponents. Shoji seems alright, but Bakugo's a jerk. And he's so strong too. I hope Iida has a plan. He'll get us through this, just like the entrance exam. "So, Iida, what's the plan?" Iida explained as Ochako watched in awe. "Our best course of action depends greatly on how the villains choose to begin this encounter. Depending on whether they chase us down or stay by the weapon, we will need to have several different responses planned. Given what I know of our opponents, certain actions seem more likely, but we must be prepared nonetheless." He looked like he was ready for anything. "We got this." Within the building, another, much less civil, strategy meeting was going on. Katsuki paced furiously, his palms already sparking. And why the hell is that half-and-half bastard on his own team? He isn't better than me. If he doesn't need help, neither do I. He barely heard Six Arms try to calm him down. But since there are 2 of us, we should at least try to come up with a strategy that makes use of both of our skills. Katsuki scoffed at him. "Not a damn chance. I'm going to show all those extras that I'm the strongest one here. Just use your quirk to tell me where those extras are. I'll handle the rest." Ochako let Iida take the lead as they entered the building. The building was clearly built to be used as a testing ground. How do they have the money for all of these fake cities? It seems a little wasteful. The floor plan was simple, with a few central hallways connected to a handful of empty rooms. Ochako noticed with some concern that there weren't any loose objects for her to use her quirk on, but she hoped it wouldn't be too much of an issue. The 2 of them methodically searched the first floor for the weapon, and they were halfway through the second floor when Bakugo struck. He rocketed around a corner of the hallway and aimed a right hook at Iida, creating an explosion as it impacted Iida's chest and sending him tumbling backward. Bakugo turned to her next. "All right, you damn extras, give me your best shot." Ochako looked around but didn't see any sign of Shoji. That meant Bakugo came down to fight them on his own. She readied herself for a fight, remembering Iida's plan for this situation. Just touch him once. Once he's floating, Iida can search for the weapon, and you'll just need to keep him busy. She saw Iida stand up beside her. A surprise attack. A cowardly move, but as expected from a villain like yourself. Despite how tense the situation was, Ochako had difficulty suppressing a laugh at Iida's dramatic manner. Iida's really taking this seriously. She saw him run towards Bakugo, sending a kick at him and getting to his other side. Bakugo dodged the hit easily, turning to face Iida again as he did. Ochako noticed that his back was now to her. This was her chance. As Katsuki sent off an explosion at glasses, he noticed Round Face running up behind him. He quickly dodged out of the way so that she was barely able to brush her fingers against him, but then he felt himself lift off the ground, completely weightless. Shit. She got me with her quirk. Round Face shouted, "Go! Get to the weapon," as Glasses nodded and ran off. Katsuki tried to give chase, making explosions in his hands to propel himself forward, but his lack of weight threw off his movements, sending him crashing into the walls, and he stood no chance against the boy's speed. "Get back here and fight me, you coward!" Realizing he wasn't going to catch up to Glasses, Katsuki turned back to Round Face. "Release your quirk, or I'll kick your ass." Now that she was on her own, she turned to run as well. Katsuki rocketed after her, still thrown off by his weightlessness. Round Face ran into one of the side rooms as Katsuki flew past it, swearing as he went by. "Damn extra with her stupid quirk." He slowly moved back into the doorway, and awkwardly crawled through the tight space, noticing Round Face barely suppressing a chuckle. "No way am I gonna let this extra get away with laughing at me." Katsuki launched himself from the doorway and aimed an explosion at her face. She barely had time to put her arms in front of her head to brace herself as the blast sent her stumbling backward. Because of his weightlessness, Katsuki rocketed backward from the force of his explosion, slamming into the wall painfully. These extras were making a fool of him. No way was he just going to let that happen. Rather than launching himself at her again, he raised his arm, taking aim with his gauntlet. "Die, you fucking extra." He pulled the pin, and the blast shot out, hitting the wall behind her and sending her flying toward him from the explosion. Suddenly, his weight returned to him. He stumbled to the ground, and walked back into the hallway, barely listening to All Might tell him off for using such a destructive attack indoors. He put his hand to his earpiece. "Hey, Six Arms. Where's Glasses?" "Not so fast." Ochako struggled to her feet. The explosion had been big enough to make her lose hold of her quirk, and even now her vision was swimming, but she wasn't about to give up. "I've got to give Iida more time. If Bakugo catches up to him, we're toast." She steadied herself and ran towards him. "I need to reactivate my quirk on him." Bakugo threw an explosive right hook, and she was launched backward, too dazed from the last explosion to dodge it. Bakugo started to walk away again, but Ochako stood up and ran at him again. "If I can just get close." She threw herself at him, getting launched away and getting up again over and over. She grabbed some of the rubble that Bakugo had made with his explosions and threw it at him, but he dealt with it too quickly for her to get an opening. She found herself on her back again, reeling from another one of Bakugo's explosions as he loomed over her. "I can't do this. He's so fast and so strong and I'm just me." Staring upwards, she noticed the ceiling start to sag, and she came up with an idea. "If I drop the ceiling on him, he might get pinned. He'll have to deal with that somehow, and I'll get my opening." Ochako rose to her feet and stayed low, hoping Bakugo didn't notice the ceiling starting to fall and staying near the walls so that Bakugo's explosions would weaken it further. She couldn't dodge all of Bakugo's hits, but she kept going, determined to help Iida succeed. Finally, it happened. With all the walls around it destroyed, the portion of the ceiling on top of him began to collapse. "Here's my opening." He aimed his left arm upwards, turning the rubble to dust with a massive blast, but Ochako used the opportunity to finally get a good tag on him, so excited by her success that she could have cheered. "I got him." Suddenly, Bakugo lashed out with an explosive uppercut, hitting her right in the jaw, sending her helmet flying off, and forcing her to release her quirk. "I was so close." Bakugo scoffed at her as she stumbled back. You don't stand a chance of beating me, just stay down. Ochako ignored him, returning to a fighting stance even as it took all of her strength to stand up. You're right. I can't beat you. But I don't have to. I just need to give Iida enough time to win. Tenya searched through the building hurriedly. He knew they did not have the time to fight Bakugo together, but he still felt ashamed for leaving Uraraka to face him alone. What if she gets hurt? Do not think like that, Tenya. You need to trust your teammate to take care of herself. He was so caught up reassuring himself that Uraraka would be fine, that he almost missed the weapon as he ran past a doorway. He hurried to a stop before turning and running towards it. He ran straight into Shoji's arms as the boy clotheslined him from behind the door, sending him crashing to the ground. Can't let you do that, Iida. Tenya hurried to his feet and took stock of his situation. He was fast, but Shoji was strong, even without having 3 times as many arms as a normal person. Fighting the boy would be a challenge and would likely take up precious time. Then Tenya realized that he didn't need to fight him. The weapon was in the middle of the room, and Shoji was in the doorway. Shoji's eyes went wide as he made the same realization as Tenya, but it was too late. Recipro burst. Uraraka was tenacious, Katsuki could give her that. She had taken more explosions than he had bothered counting, and she was still coming at him. She had nearly gotten him by dropping the ceiling on his head, but it looked like he had finally worn her down. She stumbled toward him slowly, before collapsing onto the ground. That ought to teach you. I'm the strongest there is. Katsuki let out a snort before turning to finally chase after Glasses when he heard All Might's voice over the speakers. Hero team wins. Shit. Ochako woke up in Recovery Girl's infirmary. She felt a weird numbness all over, and she felt completely drained and empty. As she started to get out of bed, she noticed Iida sitting nearby. You're awake. Are you all right? Do you still feel injured? She gave a small thumbs up. I feel yawn tired, but I don't feel hurt. Recovery Girl walked up to them. That's because I already healed your injuries. But be careful, my quirk only accelerates your natural healing process, so it used up a lot of your energy. I would recommend eating a big dinner and getting plenty of rest. Ochako quickly nodded. Of course. Internally, however, she was thinking something else. Sleeping certainly won't be a problem, but a big meal's not something I can do right now. I'll compromise though, I won't just eat mochi tonight. Oblivious to Ochako's internal monologue, Recovery Girl continued. Besides that, you're free to go. Please be more careful next time, though. My quirk isn't magic after all. Hearing this, Iida reached out a hand to Ochako. In that case, let me help you get your things. It is the least I can do for leaving you in harm's way earlier. Ochako smiled and took his hand. As they left the infirmary, she heard Recovery Girl whisper to her, he was worried about you, you know. After grabbing her bag and walking with Iida to the school's entrance, he was worried about me. Ochako made her way to a small grocery store near her apartment. With all of the energy drained from her, she almost sleepwalked through the aisles, doing her best to find what items were most on sale. Even with that, she noticed something falling in her periphery and reached out to catch it. After grabbing the can of soup, she turned toward the person who dropped it and saw a tall blonde man. He looked not just skinny, but withered, as if he should have been twice the size he currently was. She reached out with the soup. Here you go, sir. It would have been bad if you dropped this. The man gave an embarrassed smile. Thank you, young miss. Are you all right though? You look like you're barely standing. Ochako nodded. Yeah, it was just a long day of school. The man started to walk away. Of course. Then he stopped and turned back to her. You're a hero student at UA, aren't you? What do you think of the course so far? She thought for a moment. Well, it's very exciting. Today we had All Might teaching us. I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep up, you know? She stared down at her feet. Everyone's so strong and smart, and I'm just me. She shook her head. I don't know why I'm telling you this, I really am too tired. He nodded, and slowly put a hand on her shoulder. Well, I can already tell you have the heart of a hero, so if your skills come close to matching that, I'm sure you'll do incredibly. With that, he walked off with a wave. That was nice. He seemed familiar. I wonder why? I'm too tired to think right now. Ochako made her way through the store, picking up a few items that were on sale, paid for them, and headed home. She still wasn't used to how empty the apartment felt. Her parents might not have always been home, but at least their presence was still there. Her apartment, on the other hand, was blank, sterile. She let out a yawn as she took off her shoes. At least she was making friends at school. Not to mention one closer friend. She made herself a small dinner and immediately went to bed. Today was 1C's first class to be taught by a pro hero, and Izuku was practically vibrating with excitement. The class was Hero Analysis, taught by Snipe. He had sauntered into their classroom in his full hero costume, a cowboy hat, gas mask, and poncho, and introduced himself to any students who didn't immediately know who he was. Then he asked his first question. Since this class is all about figuring out heroes, y'all can start with me. Out of all of the fine heroes that why do you think I'm the one standing in front of you right now? The class was quiet for a few moments as everyone tried to decide what advantage he had over the other teachers. Finally, Izuku raised a shaky hand. Snipe pointed towards him. There's a brave fella. Now, tell us why I'm the one teaching you. Izuku began to speak softly. Well, I think it could be because, before Snipe interrupted him. Speak up, kid. I don't have super hearing. Izuku let out a long exhale and started again. It's because your quirk, homing, doesn't have very much raw power. Your use of guns helps make up for that, but equally important is your ability to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of your opponent before you get in too deep. Of course, in a situation where time is of the essence, you can still get by jumping headfirst into a fight, but nonetheless, that's good enough, kid. A few of his classmates snickered at Izuku's rambling, causing him to shrink into his desk. Snipe ignored them and continued. Actually, that answer really hit the mark. But of course, not all heroes have been blessed with my analytical skills. That's where hero analysts come in. It's their job to figure out the quirks of any villains who are on the loose and come up with strategies for the heroes they work with to defeat them. And someday that might be some of y'all's job, so pay attention in here, got it? After that introduction, the actual class consisted of watching some of the Hero Corps students' training exercises, one from 1A and one from 1B. Izuku was startled to see that the first exercise included Kaken, and shocked when Kaken lost. Kaken never lost. Although looking at how he acted, it's not surprising that they beat him. Instead of focusing on the exercise, he just wanted to beat the other students in a fight. He also didn't seem to realize that he wasn't fighting random middle schoolers anymore, but instead future heroes, people who could fight back. After showing them the first video, Snipe asked them a few questions about it. What certain people did right, what they did wrong, whether or not X, Y, and Z were smart decisions and why, that sort of thing. After his first answer, Izuku didn't raise his hand again, but whenever the class was stuck, Snipe would call on him and he would give the answer. The process was repeated for the 1B video, and the class ended. It had been the last class of the day, so Izuku packed his things and started to head out, with Shinso following behind him. Izuku immediately got to work writing everything he noticed in his newest hero notebook. All the Hero Corps students are incredible. I'm really impressed at how the two students fighting Kaken were able to beat him. And the 1B students were just as impressive. The one with the vine hair was especially interesting. Although I can see her quirk being difficult to use if the vines require the same amount of care as real vines. His train of thought was interrupted by Shinso. That was impressive. The compliment surprised Izuku. What? Shinso smirked, seemingly amused by Izuku's awkwardness. How you knew all the answers to Snipe's questions. You weren't kidding when you said you researched heroes a lot. You were a genius in there. Izuku smiled awkwardly at the compliment and went back to his notes. He was so focused on them that he didn't see the person in front of him until it was too late. He dropped his notebook as they collided and immediately started to apologize. I'm so sorry, I should. His apology fizzled out as he saw who he had bumped into. Kaken? Of course. Of course I bumped into Kaken of all people. Kaken glared at him with an all-too-familiar contempt. Watch where you're going, you damn nerd. As Izuku crouched down to pick up his notebook, Kaken put a hand on his forehead and shoved him back, sending him sprawling. I told you to stay the fuck away from me. Izuku resigned himself to whatever was about to happen. I was hoping I could avoid Kaken, but if I can't do that, I just need to not make him angrier. Suddenly, Shinso stepped between the two of them. You're from Class 1A, right? Kaken simply glared at him. We watched your match in class today, and if your quirk is half as shitty as your personality, it's no wonder you lost. Izuku couldn't believe what he was seeing. Someone's actually talking back to Kaken. Kaken looked furious at the insult, explosions sparking on his palms as he reached forward. You son of a dashed, he stopped mid-sentence, arm left hanging in the air, as a blank look entered his eyes. Shinso smirked at Kaken, before calmly picking up Izuku's notebook and helping him to his feet. You alright? Izuku gratefully took his notebook back and nodded. I've been through worse. Thanks for helping me out. Shinso just turned and kept walking. Don't mention it. I wasn't about to stand by and watch someone get bullied, especially not if they're my friend. Izuku hurried to catch up with him. Was that your quirk? That was incredible. That's what I was talking about when I said you had a perfect hero quirk. Izuku continued to ramble until they reached the main gate. Hitoshi had barely mustered up the willpower to use his quirk. It's not that he was afraid of the bully. He had dealt with bullies before, and they had learned not to mess with him. He was more afraid of what Midoriya would think of him after seeing his quirk in action. Hearing about it was one thing, but actually witnessing someone lose control of their own body was another. He had just made a friend, so he didn't want to lose him. But Hitoshi had been bullied too much to just stand by and watch. So, he intervened. And, somehow, it hadn't pushed Midoriya away. If anything, it just made him more excited. Which was weird, but Hitoshi wasn't about to complain. As they walked to the entrance of the school, and Midoriya went on about how amazing Hitoshi's quirk was, Hitoshi smiled. It feels weird to have a friend. I like it. Katsuki was seething. Despite finishing first in the entrance exam, the transition to UA had been infuriating. He had lost in his first combat training. That smart-ass girl had pointed out every mistake he made. And half had won on his own without even breaking a sweat, using a level of power that Katsuki knew he wouldn't stand a chance against. It was enough to damage even his self-confidence. After all, he was supposed to be the best. If all of his stupid classmates were better than him, then what the hell was he? And now this. Deku had bumped into him after school, and Katsuki had used the opportunity to let out some of his frustration. Then that sleepy extra had gotten in his way, and before Katsuki knew what was happening, he couldn't move. He just watched as the extra helped Deku up, and they walked away together without a second glance at him. What the fuck? How weak am I that an extra like that could stop me in my tracks like that? I'm not supposed to be weak. I'm the strongest there is. I'm a winner. I can't be a useless loser like Deku. The few students who hadn't left yet looked at him strangely as they walked by, confused as to why he was standing there like that. Go ahead. Laugh at me while you still can. You think I'm not good enough, Hayudare? Well, I'll prove you wrong. I'll get even stronger. I'll show all these damn extras why you should never mess with me. The next day, Uchiyama-sensei let them know that they needed to choose a class representative. Izuku shrank into his desk. He ended up voting for a boy named Akamine, since he seemed to really want to be the class representative, and Akamine ended up winning, so that was good. But as he looked at the votes, he was surprised to see that someone had voted for him. At lunch, he asked Shinso if he did it. Of course I did. And why wouldn't I vote for the smartest guy in the class? Izuku had no response to that. He didn't end up needing one, because as Shinso finished speaking, an alarm started to go off, warning them that there had been a security breach. It turned out that the security breach was just a bunch of overzealous reporters, so all of the panic was unnecessary. A boy from Class 1A found his way up to an emergency exit sign and informed everyone of what had happened, and everyone calmed down quickly. Izuku heard Hatsume mutter something about wanting to test out her babies on the trespassers, and that was it. But when Izuku went home, he noticed something strange. The gate that should have been under the main entrance to the school was gone. Not just open, but missing. As if it had somehow just ceased to exist. No way did a bunch of reporters do that. What actually happened here? Today was Class 1A's first major rescue training. Tenya could feel his classmates' excitement as he organized their departure from the bus. Perhaps some of them were only excited to be training at an off-campus site, but Tenya was excited solely about the rescue training. After all, rescue work was something that his brother took great pride in, so he would make sure to do his best as well. As they assembled to begin training, Tenya noticed that All Might wasn't there, but once Aizawa-sensei explained he would be joining them later, he put it from his mind. No doubt All Might is busy at the moment. Being the #1 hero must come with a plethora of responsibilities. As Aizawa-sensei and 13 explained what their training would entail, Tenya saw something appear behind them, a swirling, purple vortex that slowly grew in size until a large number of people started to emerge from it. His classmates behind him began murmuring as they saw it too, causing Aizawa-sensei to turn to look at it. As soon as he saw it, he stiffened. Everyone stay back. 13, get them out of here. Despite their teacher's warning, Tenya could see his classmates hesitating. Some of them were frightened and unsure of what to do. Others were almost too calm, choosing to analyze the villains instead of leaving. Tenya understood their feelings, but as class representative, he had duties to fulfill. He forced down his fear and attempted to take charge of the situation. Quickly, everyone. The pros have the situation under control, we just need to get out of their way. That got his classmates moving. Moving hesitantly, but still moving. I'm afraid I cannot let you leave so easily. A purple, misty villain appeared, blocking their path. It is a pleasure to meet all of you. We are the League of Villains. I apologize for barging into the USJ, but isn't this a fitting place for All Might, the symbol of peace, to take his last breath? He can't be serious. That can't be their goal. He was supposed to be here today, and yet there is no sign of him. No matter. I still have a role to play. Hoping to catch the villain off guard, Bakugo and Kirishima leaped at him, but their attacks passed through him ineffectually. Then the villain attacked, opening a portal all around them and attempting to warp them away. Tenya ran out of the portal, grabbing Shiro and Sato as he went, and reaching for Uraraka only for her to vanish before he could get to her. Uraraka. Ochako was underwater. She wasn't entirely sure how that had happened, but then she realized the villain must have teleported her there. Iida had tried to reach her, but he hadn't made it in time. I need to get back to him. We need to stick together. She had more immediate concerns, however, as a shark-like villain started to dive toward her. Not good. My quirk won't be much use underwater, and I can't take him on without it. Suddenly, Tsu appeared and gave the villain a solid kick, grabbed Ochako with her tongue, and rocketed them to the surface. Ochako took in a deep breath. They were on the boat in the shipwreck zone, and Tokoyami was there as well. She leaned up against a wall. The teachers have this under control, right? I mean, All Might is gonna be here soon, he can handle this. We just need to hold out until then. Tsu looked out at the water worriedly. No, Ribbit. If the villains spent all this time planning, they probably have a way to kill All Might. She said it so casually, but it made Ochako stare in horror. No, that's not possible. All Might's unstoppable, there's no way they could kill him. Tokoyami stood up. If that's true, we need to do whatever we can to stop their dark machinations. We're heroes in training after all. Tsu pointed out towards the water. Before we can worry about that, we need to worry about ourselves, Ribbit. A dozen villains had gathered around the boat, waiting expectantly for the students to emerge. Ochako tried to calm herself down. Think like a hero. Think like Iida. What if I used my quirk on us? Tsu's leap could probably get us all the way to the plaza, and we'd be able to help from there. Tsu shook her head. The villains would just follow us, Ribbit, and then we'd just give Aizawa-sensei more trouble to deal with. Let me distract them. They both turned to look at Tokoyami as he spoke. Float me over to the nearest piece of land, and I'll use Dark Shadow to keep the villains busy from a distance. Once I have their attention, you two float over to the main plaza. Should there be a break in their assault, I'll rejoin you. Tsu thought for a moment. It's our best shot at helping. Let's do it, Ribbit. Tenya looked around him as the mist cleared. 13 was still here, as were Shoji, Sato, Shiro, Ishido, and Koda. That meant 13 of his classmates were stuck somewhere in this facility, facing down who knows what. He needed to help them. Stop, Tenya. Trust your classmates. Worry about the threat in front of you. The warp villain was still there, disappointed he hadn't gotten them all on his first attempt but determined not to let them escape. 13 started to speak. Class rep, I have a mission for you. Run to U.A and tell them what's going on here. We need backup. Tenya was taken aback. I will not just abandon my classmates, that would be shameful. Before 13 could respond, Tenya saw his classmates move forward, standing around him in support. Go, emergency exit. Blow him away with your engine legs. You got this, class rep. They needed him to do this. He couldn't let them down. So, as 13 used her quirk to keep the villain busy, he ran. As he made it past the villain, he heard 13 cry out in pain, and he almost turned back to look, but he steeled himself and kept moving. He heard the sounds of his classmates doing everything they could to hold off the warp villain to ensure his escape. He wanted so much to help them. This is helping them. He kept running, and with one solid kick, busted down the door and escaped out into the open. The plan went off perfectly. Ochako threw Tokoyami over to the shore, and all the villains rushed toward him, hoping to take him down while he was on his own. They were met by a very angry Dark Shadow, who could attack them without risk now that Tokoyami was at a safe distance. Once Dark Shadow started attacking, Ochako tapped Tsu and herself and held on as Tsu leaped towards the plaza. Ochako dropped her quirk so that they landed near the edge of the water, the splash from their landing drowned out by the battle that was going on. Peeking their heads over the edge, they watched Aizawa-sensei fighting off the villains, and they waited for the right moment to help him. As it was, however, he seemed to have the situation under control. Out of the crowd of villains who had attacked, only a handful of them were still standing. They watched him continue to fight for a few moments, silently hoping he could take care of this threat. They didn't see the monster move. One moment, Aizawa-sensei was on his feet, facing down the remaining villains. The next he was on the ground, with a hulking, beaked monster looming over him. They stared in horror as it pummeled him into the floor, utterly terrified by its overwhelming speed and strength. Then the warp villain reappeared, and said something to the third remaining villain, a pale figure with hands attached to his body. Whatever it was, it made the hand villain start to fall apart, scratching at his neck manically. Then he calmed and he stared right at them. He charged, reaching for them with murder in his eyes. Acting on panicked instinct, Ochako shoved Tsu out of the way and noticed Dark Shadow hurrying toward them out of the corner of her eye. An explosion of dust erupted when Dark Shadow collided with the villain. Only, when the dust cleared, she saw that hadn't hit the hand villain at all. The monster had moved into its path and was standing there completely unfazed by the attack. The hand villain looked over at it and smirked. "Thank you, Momo. Fetch that little birdie for me, will you?" As the monster leaped off, he reached for Ochako again but stopped when he heard a loud voice booming from the entrance. "I am here." All Might was standing at the entrance to USJ, an expression of pure rage on his face. Ochako stared up at him, desperately hoping he would be able to save them all, and suddenly she was far away from the villain, and All Might was lowering her to the ground next to Aizawa-sensei, Tsu, and Tokoyami. "Get your teacher out of here. I'll deal with these villains." With that, All Might charged toward the hand villain, but the Nomu monster intercepted the attack again. Then with a command from the hand villain, it began to attack All Might. Ochako stared back at the fight while carrying her teacher away. They looked almost evenly matched. But All Might can win this, right? As it turned out, he couldn't. A portal from the warp villain helped the Nomu grab All Might and start to pull him into the portal. He strained to loosen the monster's grip to no avail. All Might was in trouble. All Might was about to die. Ochako passed Aizawa-sensei off to Tsu and leaped back towards the fight, using her quirk to stay in the air and keep her jumping momentum. Her brain was screaming at her that this was a terrible idea, that she wouldn't be able to help and would just end up getting killed as well, but her body moved on its own. All Might is in trouble. I need to help him. It's what a hero would do. It's what Iida would do. But she didn't head towards All Might. Instead, she went for the hand villain, one arm outstretched. Even All Might can't get Nomu to budge, so I won't be able to do anything there. But the Nomu only moved after the hand villain gave it a command, except when it was protecting him. So if I threaten him, the hand villains smirked at her and prepared to fight. Suddenly, the Nomu moved between them to protect its master. Ochako landed on it, quickly leaping back into the air. Her aerial position gave her a great view of all that happened next. With the Nomu distracted, All Might returned to his feet. And as the villains started to adjust to their new position, Ochako's classmate struck. Bakugo rocketed into the warp villain, somehow knocking him to the ground. Todoroki and Kirishima began attacking the hand villain, forcing him to retreat. The villain shouted for the Nomu to help the warp villain, so All Might pushed Bakugo aside and braced himself for the Nomu's attack. But the attack never came. Because the Nomu was floating a few inches off the ground, made weightless by Ochako's quirk. Seizing the opportunity, All Might rushed towards it and hit it right in the chest. Floating in the air as it was, it couldn't brace itself. The punch sent it flying, shattering the ceiling of the USJ as it went. With their superweapon gone and surrounded by heroes in training, the villains made a hasty retreat through a portal. Feeling her stomach start to rise from her quirk use, Ochako released her quirk and tumbled to the ground. Tenya burst back into the USJ moments later, with all the heroes UA had been able to spare. He had been impressed by how quickly they had gathered all of them. As expected from such a prestigious hero institution. I hope we are not too late. As he looked around, Tenya saw that his fears were unfounded. All Might stood unchallenged in the main plaza, and he could see over half of his classmates from here. Out of all of them, Uraraka looked to be the worst off, but even that seemed to just be nausea from her quirk. As the heroes he had brought dealt with the few villains who remained, he ran over to her. What happened? Is everyone all right? She looked over at him and smiled, relief evident on her face. Everything's all right. All Might and our classmates had the situation under control. It looks like these villains really underestimated Yuda. Ochako looked around at her classmates as they were driven back to UA. The ordeal they had survived was terrifying, and she doubted any of them would forget the sight of Aizawa-sensei and 13 injured as they were, but there was still an air of triumph about them. They had faced real villains and come out the other side relatively unharmed. They felt like actual heroes. Recovery Girl looked them all over once they returned to campus. Surprisingly, none of them had any injuries worse than minor cuts or bruises, so she quickly sent them on their way. Before Ochako could head home, however, Recovery Girl stopped her. Before you leave, All Might said he wanted to speak to you. He's in the infirmary right now, I'll take you over there. Ochako wasn't sure why All Might would want to speak with her right now. Everyone was completely spent, physically and emotionally, so it must have been something important, but she couldn't think of what he could need from her. Recovery Girl wasn't giving her anything to go off of either. Is it to tell me off for being reckless? Eventually, Recovery Girl gestured towards a door, and Ochako opened it as the nurse went off to check on the injured heroes. Inside she found the tall, blonde man from the grocery store. What's he doing here? Wait, that hair, those eyes. He looked over at her from his bed and jolted back in surprise. Young Uraraka. I didn't realize you would get here so quickly. I was planning to show you this form anyway, so there is no harm done, but I wasn't planning for you to see it first. She stared at him, trying to reconcile the image of the unstoppable hero to this frail, withered man. All Might? He nodded gravely. Indeed. This is the form in which I spend most of my time now. Naturally, I need you to promise to tell no one about this. She nodded. Of course. Are you all right? What happened to you? All Might explained to her how he had been severely injured in a fight 6 years ago, how his injury had reduced how long he could do hero work, and how the injury had been getting worse. I don't know how, but this League of Villains knew about my injury, and that is why they had the confidence to try and kill me. So when you ran to save me, I was in more danger than you could have realized. In other words, thank you. If you hadn't come to my aid, I don't know what would have happened. Ochako didn't know how to respond to that. All Might was praising her heroism. She didn't feel worthy of the honor, but she managed to force out a "You're welcome, sir." Then she added, "Is that why you wanted to talk to me?" He held up his hand. That was part of the reason, but there's one more thing I wanted to say. As I mentioned, my time as a hero is running out. That's why I came to you. I needed to find a successor, and fast. See, my quirk, one for all, has the unique ability to be passed on from person to person, like a shining torch to push back the darkness. And in the short time that I have known you, I've already seen ample evidence of your determination, your kindness, and your bravery, all of the qualities required to become a great hero. Young Uraraka, I would like for you to inherit my quirk and become the next symbol of peace. Izuku didn't go home when class ended that day. How could he have? A UA class fought off a villain attack. He needed to hear what happened. So he made an excuse to Shinso, texted his mom that he'd be getting home late, and wandered the halls, listening in for anything useful. One thing had led to another, and he found himself standing outside All Might's room in the infirmary, eavesdropping on his conversation. Izuku wasn't exactly proud to be spying on the #1 hero, but he was hoping to hear something about the fight he had just won. He wasn't expecting this. Izuku had thought that telling him he couldn't be a hero was the worst thing All Might could have said. He was wrong. Izuku had thought at the time that it was the only response All Might could reasonably have given. But if All Might's quirk could be passed on, then that wasn't the case. All Might was the only person in the world who could have made my dream a reality, and he didn't give me a second glance. Izuku moved away from the doorway so that All Might and his successor wouldn't overhear him start to fall apart. The qualities All Might listed, kindness, determination, and bravery, I could have shown him I had those traits. He must have seen how much I wanted to be a hero. I could have proved myself worthy. But he didn't care enough to let me. Instead, he's giving it to someone who doesn't even need it, someone who can already become a hero. Even my idols saw me as a worthless, quirkless kid. Well, I'm not worthless. I refuse to be. The sports festival is coming up soon, and it'll be the perfect chance to show him, to show everyone, just how wrong they are about me. Ochako sat there in shock as what All Might had said started to sink in. He wants me to take his power. He thinks that I'm worthy of taking his place. Why me? It's not that I'm not grateful, but I wasn't the only one who ran to help you at the USJ. Why not Todoroki, or Kirishima, or Iida? All Might sighed and gave her a warm smile. It seemed much more personal than the ones he gave in his hero form. Call it instinct, or a hunch, or whatever you want, but I see something in you. A little bit of myself, perhaps, and a little bit of someone better. I can tell that you would use this power to become the greatest hero the world has ever seen. Ochako lowered her gaze to the floor. I don't deserve this. I don't have a noble reason for being a hero. I can't be trusted with that much power and responsibility. I'm just another hero student who wants the money, nothing special. I'm sorry, but you're mistaken. I'm not worthy of this power. And I can't accept it. I'm sorry. She looked up at All Might to gauge his reaction. Please don't be upset. He looked disappointed but not upset. Very well. I would not force this destiny upon you. But in case you change your mind, would you do me one favor? One for all can only be inherited by someone in peak physical condition. As a hero in training, you are already in fairly good shape, but if you would work towards that ideal, it would be easier for me to pass on my quirk should you decide to accept it. There's a gym on campus where you could train as much as you want. Even if you don't change your mind about inheriting my quirk, a little extra muscle never hurt a hero. Ochako nodded. I can at least do that. Like he said, it'll be useful. I'll need every advantage I can get for the sports festival. When All Might started his search for a successor, it had never occurred to him that someone would turn down his offer. And yet, here he was, watching young Uraraka make her leave after doing just that. From their conversation in the grocery store, he could tell that she had confidence issues, but he had assumed this would be enough to put them to rest. Well, he wouldn't force the issue for now, but he would slow down his search for a successor. She would make an incredible hero. He just needed to give her time to see that. Class 1 at Kaminari, so I guess we just won our first fight against villains. I feel like we should celebrate that. I know a cool arcade in Mizudafu if you guys want to meet up on our extra day off. Ochako checked the group chat again as she got closer to the arcade. Tsu, Jiro, Ashido, and Kirishima had all sounded excited to take Kaminari up on his offer. Iida also promised to join them, saying something about how it was part of his responsibility as class representative. She had figured it would be a great opportunity to hang out with her classmates and get her mind off of what happened yesterday. The attack had been terrifying, but more than that, she was trying not to think about what All Might had said to her afterward. Why did All Might offer for me to take his power? I must have tricked him somehow. I'm just a normal hero student. I'm not especially strong or smart, and I don't even have a good reason to become a hero. I hope he finds someone better soon. Maybe I could even help him find someone more deserving. Since she lived pretty close to the arcade, she got there a little early, but she didn't mind waiting for her friends to arrive. Uraraka. It is good to see you here. Iida waved to her enthusiastically from the entrance to the arcade as she arrived. How early did he get here? I was hoping you would arrive first. That surprised her. Why is that? What's up? Iida stared down. Something has been troubling me recently, and I thought you would be the best person to talk to about it. Ochako put her hand on his arm reassuringly. Is it about yesterday? You know you did all you could, right? He nodded. I know. He hesitated before continuing. Or at least, a part of me knows. A part of me understands that leaving to get back up was the most useful thing I could have done. But the rest of me wishes I could have stayed there and fought against the villains alongside the rest of you. Between that and our training fight against Bakugo, I feel as though I keep running away from conflict, leaving others to fight my battles for me. It does not feel like what a hero would do. It feels dash. Hey guys. What's up? Ochako looked back to see Kaminari walking towards them. Iida quickly gave her a look to say that that conversation was over, for now at least. Ochako let it drop for now, and waved towards Kaminari as he joined them, but her mind was still on what Iida had said. Poor Iida. He's obviously gonna be a great hero, and we all know he would have stayed with us if he could have. The entrance exam was proof enough of that. I guess our class rep just feels protective about the rest of us. The rest of their classmates arrived before too long, and it was great to take a moment to relax with people with whom she had just fought for their lives. Plus, the arcade was fun. Kaminari ended up beating them at a light gun game, and Ashido floored everyone with her DDR skills. Iida struggled with both games, but he seemed amused by it, so Ochako hoped he was using it as an opportunity to de-stress. He had certainly earned it. They all had. Hitoshi still wasn't used to having friends, so it had come as a surprise to him when Midoriya had texted him and Hatsume, saying he wanted to hang out. Midoriya also said there was something he wanted to talk about, so Hitoshi was intrigued to find out what that was. Hitoshi was the last one to arrive at the cafe Midoriya had chosen. It was a fairly ordinary place, very open and airy, with only a few other patrons sitting around. Hatsume was already going off about her recent experiments in the support workshop, only a few of which had exploded, while Midoriya sipped a coffee and nodded vacantly. Hitoshi wasn't in a position to judge, but Midoriya looked like he hadn't gotten any sleep the night before. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was even messier than usual. He perked up as he saw Hitoshi walk in. Shinso, there you are. Midoriya handed him a menu as he sat down. Auntie Mitsuki likes this cafe, so I hope you guys do too. I thought this would be a good place to have a meeting. Hitoshi looked at him quizzically. A meeting? About what? Midoriya took a deep breath and began to speak. The sports festival is in 2 weeks, and I know both of you have a lot riding on this. So, I figured that we should pool our talents to prepare for it. I did a lot of thinking last night. Hitoshi chuckled. That explains the eye bags. And I realized that the hero students, unsurprisingly, have a lot of advantages in this competition. And if we want to overcome them, we'll need to work together and get creative. But I think that between Hatsume's support items and Shinso's quirk not to mention your genius, Hitoshi chimed in. Midoriya continued, seeming to ignore the compliment. We have a real shot at this. Hitoshi stared at him. Midoriya was clearly passionate about this. There was a fire in his eyes that Hitoshi hadn't seen before. Midoriya seemed content to spectate the sports festival a few days ago, so what happened to him? Maybe I'm just not used to people helping me out, but I feel like there has to be more to it than he's saying. I guess I shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. So, what's the plan? Midoriya pulled out a small notebook. So, one advantage the Hero Corps students have over us, well, one that we can actually mitigate, is that they're training right now. So, we need to be training as well. Fortunately, UA has a gym that's open to all students, so that shouldn't be a challenge. More than that though, I need data on our opponents. I need to know the ins and outs of their quirks so that I can adequately plan against them. Hitoshi raised his hand. What about our hero analysis course? Is that not enough data for you? Midoriya shook his head. Unfortunately, no. The first day we had it, we only looked at 2 matches from hero core students. 2 out of 10. Combine that with the fact that they have hero practice every afternoon, instead of just twice a week, and there's a bunch of potential data I'm missing out on. But that's where Hatsume comes in. He turned to Hatsume. I need some sort of discreet camera that I can sneak into the observation rooms for the hero classes so that I can watch it back once I get home. Or I guess 2, one for 1A, one for 1B. Can you do that? At the mention of building something, a grin spread across Hatsume's face. Can I do that? That's nothing. I'll make you a much more impressive baby, and I'll do it by Monday. Midoriya smiled at her obvious enthusiasm. I look forward to it. Oh, and can you keep this one a secret? I doubt UA would be happy to hear that we're spying on them. They ended up staying at the cafe an hour after finishing their meeting, just to hang out. Hitoshi was impressed by how much Midoriya had already planned for. I don't know why Midoriya's decided to give the sports festival everything he's got, but I'm glad I'm on his side. Those hero course brats won't know what hit him. Tenya started his stopwatch and began another lap. The sports festival was coming up soon, and he needed to be as prepared as possible. He had a legacy to live up to, and people that he needed to make proud. His parents and Tensei would obviously be watching it, if not as it was broadcast then certainly after the fact. It would be the perfect opportunity to show them how much he had grown, and how grateful he was for all of their help. He reached the beginning of the track again and checked his watch. 2 seconds faster than the previous one. Good, but I can do better. I will have to, if I hope to live up to my brother's precedent. True to her word, Hatsume had the cameras ready by Monday, so Izuku and Shinso came to school early so she could show off her newest baby. I call this brilliant invention bugs. It's a set of 10 tiny flying cameras. They also look like ladybugs, which isn't just cute, it also means that someone will have to look really hard to tell that something's up. They're stored in and charged by this little case, and they work as long as they're within 2 kilometers of it. The case can be plugged into any computer, from which you can control the bugs and watch the footage, either live or pre-recorded. What do you think? Izuku was floored by the presentation. Having 10 of them is overkill, but this makes things much easier than I had expected. I hadn't actually figured out how to discreetly place cameras inside the observation chambers, so the cameras moving themselves to the location takes care of that problem. This support item is incredible. Even a pro hero would benefit from something like this. They'd be able to scope out an entire building without risk, or even... His analysis of the item's many field applications was interrupted by Shinso waving a hand in front of his face. Hello? Earth to Midoriya? What do you think? Oh, it's incredible. Beyond incredible. Thank you, Hatsume. This'll work perfectly. She gave a wide grin at the compliment. I know. My babies are perfect. Katsuki stared around the cityscape. Today's training was to find a randomly assigned villain before any of the other classmates in their group, and he was not about to lose another training exercise. With the sports festival around the corner, every day of training became even more important than it already had been. I have to win this, damn it. I'm supposed to be a winner. I've already failed way too many times at UA. Like when he lost on the first day of hero training, and when that sleepwalker kid completely shut him down. If he wanted to live up to his own standards, he needed to win, and win absolutely. And for that, he had to take each and every training exercise seriously and learn as much as he could from them. He caught a glimpse of his target on the streets below and dove toward them with a growing smirk on his face. Come on, you damn extra. Let me show you how much I've already learned. Izuku caught Shinso's punch and tossed him onto the mat. The two of them were sparring in the gym, and it wasn't going too well for Shinso. It turned out Izuku's analytical skills came in pretty handy in a fight, while Shinso had always used his quirk to avoid fights in the first place. And while Izuku's hadn't necessarily fought against his bullies, He at least knew how to take a punch. Shinso had knocked Izuku down a couple of times, but Izuku was clearly the better fighter. Well, that's why we're doing this. If he's going to do well at the sports festival, he can't just rely on his quirk. He reached a hand down to his friend. You really shouldn't have done that. Shinso gladly took it and pulled himself up. Thrown that punch or... Izuku laughed. Declared war on Class 1A. Our entire plan depends on you staying under the radar. If you make yourself a target, they might try to find out what your power is, and then you're screwed. It's bad enough you used it on Kaken Dash. What? Should I have just let him bully you? Izuku paused at that and chose his response carefully. No, of course not. I did appreciate the help. It's just, you're my friend, and I know how much you have riding on this. I want to make sure you do as well as possible. Shinso seemed thrown off by what Izuku had said. His next words seemed hesitant. That was really sweet. A familiar smirk returned to his face. Now, how about we get back to kicking each other's asses? Izuku laughed at the response as he returned to a fighting stance. If you insist. Mei took a swig of water before glancing back at her newest baby. School had ended hours ago, and she was surprised Power Loader hadn't kicked her out yet, but the hover boots were finally ready. This baby's gonna kill at the sports festival. It probably won't even explode. Too bad Green told me not to show off the bugs. They're the best thing I've made so far. Still, his help in getting to round 3 should more than make up for that. And I've got more than enough babies anyways to blow everyone away. Time to show everyone what Hatsume is capable of. She looked up to see Power Loader glance into the room, stopping in surprise as he realized she hadn't gone home yet. Oops. Gotta go. Izuku stared at his computer. As expected, Hatsume's bugs worked perfectly. Today's hero training was one-on-one sparring with all of the students paired off and fighting simultaneously, so there was a lot of information to process, but the bug he had tailing Class 1A had caught all of it. He paused and rewound the footage frequently, focusing on different students each time, and writing all of his observations into Hero Notebook number 18. This notebook was going to be exclusively for the sports festival, so it contained only the first-year students of the hero course. It was also different from his other notebooks as it focused not only on the hero's strengths, but also on their weaknesses and on possible ways to defeat them. The training exercise he was watching today gave him plenty of ideas all on its own. He heard the door to his room open as his mom peeked her head in. Izuku, dinner's ready? She looked at him crouched over his desk, writing notes. You's keeping you busy, huh? Izuku quickly shut off the recording and closed his notebook, not wanting his mom to catch him spying on the hero course. It's not just schoolwork. The sports festival is coming up soon, and one of my friends is hoping to use it as an opportunity to transfer into the hero course. I promised him I'd help him out as much as I could, so I've been doing a bit of extra research. Izuku felt a pang of guilt about lying to her, but he couldn't explain his true motive to her. He wanted to help Shinso, but that wasn't why he was willing, eager even, to spend hours researching their opponents. I'm sick of being seen as useless, that I'm not worth anyone's time, just because I don't have a quirk. If the sports festival is Shinso's chance to prove he can be a hero, it's my chance to prove I'm not a failure, not useless, not someone to be protected. That I'm good for something. And maybe I can prove to All Might that he made a mistake in ignoring me. But there was no way he could tell his mom any of this. She worried about him so much already, hearing all that would just make it worse. Inko looked at her son worriedly as he wolfed down his food. Ever since Katsuki's class had been attacked by villains, Izuku had seemed utterly fixated on something. Apparently, it had something to do with helping his friend with the sports festival, but there had to be more to it than that. Something had lit a fire under her boy. He had been spending all of his time home in his room, looking at hero fights, and he had barely spoken to her for a week. This mania was so much worse than his depression had ever been. Inko was worried about him, but whenever she tried to learn what was causing this, he just closed off. I know you don't think I'll understand, but I'm here for you. When you're ready to tell me what's happening, I'll do everything I can to help you out. Izuku almost laughed at the look of shock Shinso gave him. You want me to do what? Izuku tore a page out of his notebook and handed it to Shinso. Use your quirk on me, and give me each of these commands in order. If I'm going to be building strategies around your quirk, I need to know how it works. And what better way to understand it than to experience it firsthand? Hatsume, are you recording? She gave a thumbs up. Ready to go, green. Do your thing, purple. Shinso gave him a hesitant glance. Are you sure about this? Izuku nodded. Absolutely. And just like that, a weird fog enveloped Izuku's brain as he lost control of his entire body. Interesting. The victim holds onto consciousness and is still fully aware of their surroundings. That's much more useful for this research, but I wonder if there's some way to make the victim forget about their experience. Perhaps Shinso could give that as a command? He continued his analysis as Shinso went through the list of commands. Simple things like touch your toes and do 5 jumping jacks. Then Shinso reached the final command, slap yourself, and he froze up. Izuku barely noticed Shinso's change in demeanor as his analysis continued. This last command is the most interesting one. Based on what I know, the slap should break his control of me, but if he can make his victim hurt themselves, that would certainly be helpful in a fight. Shinso opened his mouth, but the command never came as he closed it immediately. Instead, Izuku felt control return to him as Shinso fell to the ground. Oh no, what did I do? Izuku ran over to Shinso, who had his face in his hands and was trying to keep his breath under control. What happened? Are you all right? Shinso didn't look up at him. I can't use my quirk to do something like that. Even if it would be useful, even though my quirk probably could do it, I can't. It's something a villain would do. Now he glanced up at Izuku. Let's not study my quirk anymore. I refuse to brainwash you again. Izuku looked at him confused. The first caveat made sense, it was probably dumb to try that, but the second one seemed weird. Why not? Shinso stood up abruptly. He struggled with the words for a moment before finally managing to force them out. Because you're my friend. And it feels wrong to take over my friend's body. He stormed off, leaving Izuku to stare after him in surprise. Ochako took a moment to take a swig of water as she looked around her. Even though there was no way she would ever accept All Might's offer to inherit his power, she was glad he had recommended Yue's gym. She didn't have the money for a gym membership or exercise equipment, so this was her best opportunity for getting in better shape for the sports festival. It was hard, exhausting work, but with an hour after school every day, she was already starting to see improvement, and she knew the extra muscle would come in handy soon. The sports festival was her best chance to get on the radar of famous hero agencies and achieve her goal. It would probably be a lot easier to get noticed if I had All Might's power, but that's a terrible reason to accept it. I'm not worthy of his power, so I need to do this with just my own. Luckily for her, she seemed to be working harder than her classmates. She didn't doubt that some of them had the equipment to work out elsewhere, but most of them only came to the gym once or twice a week. In fact, she only noticed one other student who was there every day, a green-haired, plain-looking boy who she was pretty sure wasn't even in the hero course. She wondered what was driving him to work so hard, so one day she decided to ask him. Hi, I'm Uraraka Ochako. I've seen you around here a lot, so I was wondering, what's your name? Izuku looked over at the girl who introduced herself to him. He recognized the voice. It was her. All Might's successor. He had seen her working out around the gym and approved of the obvious determination, but he had made sure to keep his distance from the next symbol of peace. But here she was, introducing herself to him. At least she's not some stuck-up brat. I might as well be polite. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Now that we're introduced, maybe we can go back to our own, very different, circles. She didn't seem done, however. I just wanted to ask you something. Why are you working so hard? Sorry that came out wrong. Unless I'm wrong, you're not even from the hero course. So, where's your determination coming from? That was a prickly question, but Izuku had a decently unsuspicious answer for it. You're right that I'm not in the hero course, but that just means I have to work harder than you. I assume you heard Shinso's declaration of war? You aren't the only ones with a lot riding on the sports festival, and if I'm going to get what I want, I'm going to need to work twice as hard as all of you. I'm not lying, but I'm also not saying what it is I want. And maybe it was aggressive enough to get her to leave me alone. Izuku turned to get back to training, But then he stopped himself, a question forming in his mind. What about you? What is driving you to become a hero? I'm doing it for money. The shock was obvious on Izuku's face, though he did a better job of hiding the rage that her answer filled him with. All Might's trusted you with his power, and that's what you want from it? What was he thinking? She noticed his surprise at her answer and corrected herself with some panic in her voice. That sounded so much worse than I meant it to. How do I say this? My parents run a small construction company, but we haven't been getting much work. She stared at her feet. It's made us poorer than poor, but despite that, my parents have always done what's best for me, you know? I have no idea how many sacrifices they've made for me. And I want to pay them back, somehow. Get signed by a good agency, make a lot of money, and give my parents a better life, to pay them back for everything they've done for me. As she spoke, Izuku felt his anger and indignation slowly fade away. He understood what Uraraka felt. Even though he didn't want to understand her. Not when All Might had chosen her as his successor almost on the spot when he hadn't deemed Izuku worthy of a second glance. But he thought about his mother, how much she had sacrificed for him, how difficult it had been for her to raise him on her own, and how she had done her best for him despite all of the obstacles in her way. And he couldn't help but understand. He would do the same in Uraraka's place. It's still the wrong motive for the next symbol of peace, but she didn't choose to have this destiny thrust upon her. Oblivious to his paradigm shift occurring before her, Uraraka continued to speak. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I know it's a stupid reason to be a hero, and it's not stupid. Izuku hadn't expected to say that. The words slipped out on their own. Nevertheless, as Uraraka stopped apologizing, he continued. I never got to meet my dad, but my mom has been there for me my entire life. And I would do anything for her. Your goal might not be as idealistic as some of your classmates, but it's no less noble. She stared at him, eyes wide. She obviously hadn't been expecting a response like that. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Izuku's eyes grew wide as he realized what he just did. What came over me, spilling my heart out like that? Don't mention it. I should probably get going. Good luck at the sports festival. Uraraka waved as he hurried out of the gym. Okay, she was nicer than I was expecting. She still seems like a poor choice for the next symbol of peace, but I guess that's not her fault, it's All Might's. Hitoshi jolted awake. He had hoped that the training Midoriya had put him through would leave him too exhausted for dreams, but he was having no such luck. The same familiar nightmare found its way into his head. Even awake, he could still see the terror on his mother's face. She thought I was a monster. Sensing his distress, Checkers crawled into his lap, and he petted her, trying to focus on the feel of her fur instead of on his dream. Calm down, Hitoshi. She was wrong. You're not a monster. And it's not just you and Mrs. Egamura who believe that anymore. Not only is Midoriya not afraid of you, even though he felt the effects of your quirk firsthand, but he also thinks your power is incredible. Hatsume's not afraid of you either, although she might be too crazy to feel fear. Regardless, you have people fighting for you now. And with their help, you're going to show everyone who you really are. A hero, not a monster. The day of the sports festival had finally arrived. Izuku changed into his P uniform quietly, already going through every possible scenario in his head. He pulled out a few extra things from his backpack, knee pads, elbow pads, and a pair of high-grip gloves, and he added them to his uniform. He considered including a helmet, but he had eventually decided that read as scared instead of prepared, which wasn't what he wanted the audience to think of him. He assumed that any student who filled out the paperwork would have been allowed these little extras, but his disadvantage of being quirkless had made it easy to get approved. I doubt a pair of knee pads will help much against Kaken, but I need to take every advantage I can. He also took a moment to go over his objectives for the day. Show off. I'm sick of being treated like I'm useless. This is the perfect opportunity to prove everyone wrong about me. I'll be going up against some of the most promising future heroes in Japan, so if I manage to beat some of them, that will clearly prove my worth. It's probably impossible for someone like me to transfer into the hero course, but who knows? If All Might realizes his mistake, anything could be possible. Help my friends. My friends are relying on the sports festival. Shinso has a real shot at transferring into the hero course, he just needs to do well today. It's also the perfect opportunity for Hatsume to show off her inventions to the world. I need to do what I can to help them out because what else are friends for? Make Kaken look bad. My whole life, Kaken's been there to push me into the dirt and tell me just how utterly weak and useless I am. He's a bully, plain and simple. So if I can show everyone here how unworthy of being a hero Kaken is, today will be a success. Izuku found Kaken's speech confusing. Besides the question of who in their right mind would choose Kaken to give a speech, he acted differently than Izuku had been expecting. He didn't gloat or laugh, he just stated that he would win matter-of-factly. It almost sounded to Izuku that he was trying to convince himself. Interesting. He then listened intently as Midnight explained the first round. It would be a simple obstacle course around UA's campus, though the obstacles would likely be anything but simple. As he began to strategize in his head, Shinso and Hatsume moved over to him. "Alright Green, what's the plan?" Izuku thought for a moment before answering. "Well, the fact that Midnight didn't tell us how many people would pass is interesting. It was probably to encourage us all to do our best since we don't know where the cutoff is. That being said, I doubt that UA would eliminate any hero course students before they get a chance to show off, so there should be a little over 40 people passing this round. So don't go all out just yet. Hatsume, if you want to show off some of your babies, go ahead, but Shinso, don't use your quirk yet. Since it relies so much on the element of surprise, you should wait as long as possible before you reveal it. Just stay under the radar this round, and there'll be time to show off later." Inko glanced at the empty space on the couch as the sports festival began. It felt weird watching this without Izuku sitting next to her, excitedly analyzing the quirks of every student participating with infectious enthusiasm. It felt quiet, empty. She was proud of her son for making it into UA, but a part of her was hoping he would be able to come home early after he was eliminated so that they could watch the last rounds together. She quickly scolded herself for thinking that. I should be cheering for him, not hoping he gets eliminated. I know today means a lot to him. With that, she focused her attention on the race once more. Katsuki was near the front, good for him, neck and neck with a student she heard the announcer call Todoroki. She didn't get to see Izuku often with how focused the cameras were on the frontrunners, but he seemed to be doing all right. He was being careful, letting his more capable competitors deal with anything dangerous first. She wasn't sure why he had picked up a piece of metal from the destroyed robots, but she assumed it was for some sort of protection. Katsuki and that Todoroki boy were almost at the end when the cameras caught an explosion behind them. A bunch of mines must have gone off at the same time. I hope Izuku wasn't in that. As she stared, Inko saw a piece of metal from one of the robots rocket forward with a boy riding on it. Her boy. Her fragile, quirkless boy. Izuku, no. You're going to get hurt. She watched in terror as her little boy was launched towards the frontrunners, hitting another mine to knock them off balance as he landed. Her terror turned to amazement as Izuku got up and ran forward, apparently unharmed. And the finish line was right in front of him. She stood up without realizing it, cheering Izuku on as she heard the announcers declare the winner. And the first to finish is... Wait, Eraser, who is that? It was Izuku. It was her boy. So much for staying under the radar. Hitoshi could barely hold in his laughter at the sheepish look that Midoriya gave him. I'm sorry, I guess I got a little competitive. That got a smirk out of Hitoshi. How are you so cool, yet so easy to mess with? Don't worry about it. It was definitely worth it to see everyone's faces when a general studies student won the first round. And they don't even know the best part yet? Midoriya was about to respond when Midnight started to explain the second round. It would be a team cavalry battle. The rider of each team would have a headband with a certain number of points on it, and the goal was to steal headbands and get as many points as possible. Each team member would be worth a different number of points based on where they placed in round 1, and for finishing first, Midoriya would be worth 10 million. So much for staying under the radar, indeed. Midoriya had already been muttering to himself about what the best strategy would be, but that announcement stopped him in his tracks. He flinched as everyone turned to stare at him, trying to make himself as small as possible. Hitoshi put a hand on his shoulder to steady him. That definitely threw a wrench in things, but I know you're smart enough to adapt. So, what's our plan? Hatsume moved next to him as he asked, supporting his statement with a wide grin. Midoriya glanced back at them, surprise obvious on his face. You mean, you want to be on my team even though I'll have a massive target on my back? Hitoshi opened his mouth to respond, but Hatsume beat him to it. Of course, Green. Since you finished in first place last round, everyone will be watching you, so if I'm on your team, they'll all see my babies in action. Hitoshi chuckled at her response and added his own reasoning. After everything that you've done to help me, and everything you'll probably keep doing, there's no way I'm abandoning you now. And even if there was, my Quirk's one-person limit means I need a few willing teammates. So, what's our plan? Midoriya seemed beyond relieved at what his friends said. Well, having such a valuable headband throws off the strategy one was planning to use, but you're right, we can adapt to this. First, we'll need a fourth member. He paused for a moment, looking over at the hero students, trying to decide which one would best complete their team. Shinso, can you get Azui to join us? The frog girl. Hitoshi nodded and walked over to her. Azui, is it? Do you want to join our team? She shook her head. I appreciate the offer, Ribbit, but I was dashed. Her expression went blank as Hitoshi activated his quirk. I know we're giving her a free pass to the third round, but this still feels a little wrong. He tried not to think too hard about it. Katsuki was so fucking done. He had been neck and neck with Half and Half, he had been about to beat Half and Half, when Deku fell from the sky like a goddamn meteor. And then he won. Useless, quirkless, Deku beat him. Katsuki was barely able to hold onto any semblance of control. This is wrong. All of this is wrong. I'm supposed to win, and Deku's supposed to lose. Who the hell does that nerd think he is, anyway? He should know better than to get in my way like this. I will fucking murder him. But first, as much as he hated the idea, he needed teammates. Luckily for him, the extras were practically lining up to team up with him, shitty hair in front. Come on Baku bro, I'll be a horse that never falters. He nodded. Shitty hair, tape face, and... He looked at the crowd of extras clamoring to join him and noticed one person standing past them, scratching her head worriedly. Perfect. Uraraka. Ochako turned in surprise as Bakugo said her name. Iida had joined Todoroki's team, and Tsu had teamed up with Midoriya and his friends, so she hadn't been sure what she was going to do. She certainly hadn't expected Bakugo to want her on his team. She thought he was still mad at her over the first day of hero training. As she walked over to his team, she heard Mina shout, "How come you use her real name?" Bakugo practically barked back at her. Because she's earned it, raccoon eyes. As Mina stomped off, Bakugo turned back to Ochako. Uraraka, remember how you made me float in our combat training? It was annoying as hell. But if I'm prepared for it, I can turn it into a big advantage, because the only rule of this game is that I can't touch the ground. Ochako nodded. I didn't see that coming, but if Bakugo's relying on me, I won't let him down. All around the arena, teams began forming and strategizing, desperate to win the upcoming cavalry battle. Izuku glanced up at Shinso as he tied the headband around his head. It made the most sense to have him on top since he needed to focus on his quirk. Azui was in front since that was the best place for her to use her tongue from, not to mention the best place for her to not get jostled by the other teams, and he and Hatsume were on the back left and right, respectively. The first minute is going to be the hardest. After that, the match should descend into chaos, but everyone's going to start by coming right for us. Is everyone ready? Shinso and Hatsume nodded in response. Azui, of course, didn't respond. Then they all heard Present Mix's voice over the speakers. Ready or not, here we go. Let the cavalry battle begin. As Izuku had predicted, all of the other teams charged straight for them. Good thing we started on the edge, at least no one can sneak up behind us. Kaken was the first to get close, rocketing through the air much faster than he should have been able to. Uraraka's on his team, she must have made him weightless. Shinso pointed one of Hatsume's net guns at him and pulled the trigger. Kaken narrowly managed to change his direction fast enough to avoid it. It forced him to fly over their heads, but he turned around quickly and flew back at them. You can't stop me that easily, you damn nerd. Izuku looked between Kaken and the advancing horde of other hero students. There were way too many for them to fight off. He braced himself. Make sure Azui doesn't get jostled. Suddenly, a wall of ice emerged between them and the rest of the competitors, and Kaken was grabbed by a piece of tape and pulled out of the way. That left Izuku and his friends face to face with Todoroki's team. Iida was in the front, with Kaminari and Yaoyorozu on the sides. It looks like they're wearing roller skates. A clever use of Yaoyorozu's quirk, since it means they can make use of Iida's speed without the rest of them needing to be able to run as fast. I appreciate Todoroki holding off the other competitors with his ice, but this team seems like more than we can handle. Shinso aimed the net gun at them, but Todoroki dodged out of the way and ripped the headband off of Shinso's head as they ran past at superhuman speed, leaving a wall of ice behind them to keep Midoriya from following for good measure. Izuku heard Present Mix commentating over the chaos of the match. Unfortunate moment for Team Midoriya. I guess that just goes to show how much more training the Hero Corps students have had. This looks like it for our underdogs. That announcement made Izuku smirk. Now that distraction is over, let's get on with our actual plan, shall we? Hatsume, give Shinso the flamethrower. Let's get out of this ice. Katsuki had been so close to getting Deku's headband when Half and Half got in his way. As he was pulled back to his team, he watched as Half and Half ran out from behind the wall of ice, putting the 10 million point headband around his neck. Shame I won't be able to teach Deku a lesson myself, but I've still got a match to win. Katsuki decided to let the extras try to fight Half and Half first, in hopes that they would create an opening for him, or at least wear Half and Half down a little. He quickly realized that had been the right plan, as Pikachu electrocuted them all, and Half and Half used the opening to freeze them to the floor. Well, now that most of them are out, it's time to... Suddenly, he felt his headband get yanked off of his head. He turned to see it wrapped around a horn of some sort, and it flew back to some 1B extras. On top was a smug blonde bastard, the metal shitty hair ripoff was in front, and on the sides were a girl with horns and some boring brown-haired boy. The blonde bastard smirked. Everyone says one as so great, but you don't seem that tough at all. Didn't you say you were going to win? Katsuki glared at him. Half and Half will have to wait. Let's teach these 1B punks a lesson. Uraraka? He reached out his hand to her and she high-fived him, activating her quirk. With that, he launched off, easily dodging the horns that flew towards him and sending an explosive hook to throw the blonde bastard off balance. To Katsuki's surprise, he blocked the hit, turning himself into metal to withstand the blast. Wait, that's the other guy's quirk, how is he using it? He didn't get time to think as the blonde bastard tapped Katsuki's arm and launched an explosion at his face. Katsuki flew back from the blast until Tape Arms pulled him back. Shitty Hair looked at him worriedly. You alright? Katsuki sneered. Of course I'm alright. Leave your pity for people who need it. That blonde bastard can copy quirks, so I can't just overwhelm him with raw power. We need to be smart about this, so here's the plan. Nito was almost laughing at what had just happened. That 1A brat's face, when he had his own quirk used against him, was priceless. We aren't done yet, bastard. He looked over to see the brat's team coming back to them for another round. Haven't had enough yet? This should be fun. Pony, get him with your horns. Her horns shot out, but the redhead reached up and caught them before they could hit anything. For a brief moment, Nito was impressed that he could hold on to them, given how sharp they were, but then he realized that the redhead was the Tetsu knockoff. It wouldn't hurt him at all. Nito launched an explosion at the main brat, but he rocketed himself up and out of the way with controlled explosions. As his attention followed the brat, he felt the horse tip over and turned to see Tetsu floating off the ground. Monoma, watch out for that girl. Her quirk is making me float. Nito glanced over at the girl in question. That was a clever move, pinning them in place like that. But he could work around that. One good hit with the explosion power should stop her. Nito had lost track of the main brat and would have been completely caught off guard by his sudden assault if Tsuburaba hadn't made an air wall just in time to block it. Tsuburaba smirked at the brat's surprise. Thought you could sneak in like that? You aren't getting past me. Unfazed, the brat sent off an explosion and shattered the air wall. He reached out to grab the headbands, but Nito just pointed his arm at him and let off an explosion. Suddenly, a piece of tape wrapped around Nito's arm and pulled it away from the brat, forcing the blast to miss. With him off balance, and most of his team rendered powerless, there was nothing stopping the brat from grabbing all 4 headbands Nito had collected and rocketing back to his own team. Nito looked at his own team in panic. Tetsu was regaining his weight and Tsuburaba was fine, but Pony's horns were still in the redhead's hands. They weren't looking great, but maybe they could pick up a few headbands from the teams the Ice Kid had frozen. He looked over towards them, and realized all of their headbands had already been stolen. How did that happen? Time's up. Present Mike had been amazed at the cavalry battle, so his voice sounded even more enthusiastic than usual as he announced the results. In first place, no surprise here, Team Todoroki. He waited for the applause to die down before looking at the scoreboard again. In second place, Team Midoriya? When did they come back from the dead? I guess this underdog story isn't over yet. In third place, Team Bakugo. And in fourth place, no one else has any points. Where did everyone else's headbands go? It had been surprisingly simple to sneak their way to victory in the second round. As Izuku had guessed, everyone's attention was on the 10 million point headband, so the hardest part had been making sure Azui wasn't released from Shinso's control while they pretended to have an interest in defending it. After that, it had been even easier than Izuku had expected. Todoroki had helped out a great deal by giving Izuku's team a shield before freezing almost all the other teams. Once they used Hatsume's miniature flamethrower to get past the ice wall, they just had to use Azui's quirk to steal the headbands off of their competitors' heads, since none of them still had the mobility to avoid it. Anyone who gave them trouble was dealt with using Shinso's quirk. He could only maintain the quirk on one person at a time, but a few seconds was more than enough to get the headband off of someone without a fight. Given how briefly they had to be under his control, there's a chance that they didn't even realize what Shinso's quirk was. Once Present Mike called time and announced the results, Izuku looked around proudly. He caught Kaken's eye, and somehow found the courage to give an obnoxious wave to his furious rival. Looks like I've beaten you in both rounds so far. Not so useless after all, am I? Izuku stared ahead quietly as the teachers decided who the fourth team to make it the final round should be. He noticed Shinso explaining to Azui what had happened with the cavalry round. All right, that makes 2 hero students in the final round who know about Shinso's quirk, Kaken and Azui. Azui should be too grateful for a free ticket to the final round to tell anyone about brainwashing, and I can't imagine Kaken telling anyone anything. So as long as Shinso's not up against either of them, he should be fine. He paused his train of thought as Midnight took the stage. After some consideration, Team Monoma will be advancing to the next round, as they were the last team to lose their headbands. And with that decided dash. Excuse me, Ribbit? Izuku looked over in surprise as Azui had her hand raised. I want to give up my spot in the final round. I don't remember what happened during the cavalry battle, Ribbit, so I don't feel comfortable advancing. Izuku was shocked at what he heard. The sports festival is the most important event of the year for getting heroes to notice you. Why is she giving up a chance like this? It's stupid, it's actually really heroic. Izuku checked Azui's face again. She seems completely earnest, without a trace of an ulterior motive. And yet, it's the smartest thing she could do. Her quirk is impressive, but she's already had plenty of opportunities to show that off, and it's not like she could win the whole festival. This sends a clear message to anyone watching that she has as heroic a nature as anyone here. As Izuku was overanalyzing the request, Midnight simply accepted it, and Tokoyami was chosen to take her place. That left the following matchups. Shinso's up against the air wall guy from Class 1B. That's good, there's no way he knows about brainwashing. And Iida definitely seems earnest enough for Hatsume's plan to work on him. That means I just need to worry about myself. Yaoyorozu is definitely a winnable matchup, but that means I'll have to face Kaken afterward. That's going to hurt. He noticed Yaoyorozu sneaking away from the field with Todoroki. That looks suspicious. Maybe I can learn something if I follow them. I'm sure Shinso would appreciate anything I can find on his second opponent as well. Azui, wait up. As she turned around, Hitoshi rushed to catch up with her. Why am I doing this? She's obviously going to hate me for brainwashing her. I'm sorry about last round. I was only able to justify it to myself because we were getting you into the tournament round, so now that you turned your spot down, I just feel like a jerk. Not that I'm blaming you. It was noble of you to give up your spot, I just dash. You don't need to apologize, Ribbit. Hitoshi cut his rambling short. What? Why not? It's like you told our class, you need to do well here, so it makes sense you do whatever you could to advance. Besides, Ribbit, you thought you were helping me too. I just didn't feel comfortable riding off of your skill when I hadn't done anything. Seriously? What is it with these UA students being so nice? Oh, one more thing, Ribbit. You can call me Tsu. It's what my friends call me. Hitoshi just stared at her as she walked away. Thank you. That was illuminating. Apparently, Izuku had a talent for stumbling across massive secrets of major heroes. He was hoping that Yaoyorozu and Todoroki would discuss some of their strategies for the tournament round, but the conversation had been far more interesting than that. Yaoyorozu must have previously asked why Todoroki never used his left side, his fire side, because that's what he told her. Turns out Endeavor was abusive, and he had made Todoroki's life hell for the goal of forging him into a hero stronger than All Might. Todoroki was holding back to make a point to his father that he could be a great hero with just the ice quirk he inherited from his mother. When Todoroki finished his story, Izuku quickly slipped away so that they wouldn't realize he was eavesdropping. The number 2 hero's abusive. That's extremely concerning. Given his personality, it's not as surprising as it could be, but it's still shocking. I doubt the Hero Commission knows about it, they would have done something years ago. Maybe Todoroki should try reaching out to... He was so caught up with that revelation that he didn't notice Kaken walking towards him until it was too late. Kaken grabbed his shoulder and shoved him to the ground. Watch where you're going, you damn nerd. Izuku looked up in terror. Kaken, what are you doing back here? Please don't be looking for me. Please don't be looking for me, please don't. I was looking for you. Crap. What the fuck do you think you're doing? What happened to staying out of my way? Izuku tried to get to his feet, but a hand on his shoulder kept him on the ground. You're not going anywhere yet, Deku. And your sleepwalker friend isn't here to save you either. Now, answer the question. Izuku shouted his response without thinking. I'm trying to be something, Kaken. I'm sick of being treated like I'm worthless, so I'm trying to prove that I'm worth something. He clamped a hand over his mouth. What was I thinking? That's going to make it so much worse. To Izuku's surprise, Kaken's hand lifted from Izuku's shoulder. You never learn, do you, Deku? You'll always be a worthless, quirkless nobody. It's a shame Big Hair's gonna take you out of the tournament before I get the chance to beat that into your useless head again. And with that he walked off. Katsuki didn't understand. Where did Deku get a spine like that? Ever since he got into UA, he's been talking back to me, acting like he isn't worthless? But he isn't worthless. Obviously. He beat me to... Was this whole useless thing an act for him? Has he been laughing at me behind my back this whole time? And if I can't even beat him, what the fuck does that say about me? He stopped to wipe a few tears from his face before anyone could notice. Stop crying. I'm stronger than that. And the sports festival isn't over yet. I still have time to prove I'm the best. Deku better beat Big Hair, because I need to remind him that he'll never be my equal. Welcome back, listeners. It's time for the tournament round. For our first match, we've got our first underdog from Class 1C, Shinso Hitoshi. And facing him is 1B's very own blowhard, Tsuburaba Kozai. Hitoshi smirked as he stared at his opponent. The hero brat seemed loose, overconfident, and utterly unaware of what Hitoshi's quirk did. As Present Mike finished the countdown, Hitoshi called out. So, I bet you're feeling lucky that your first match is against a general studies kid, aren't you? Tsuburaba matched his smirk. I mean, don't take it personally, but dash. And just like that, Hitoshi won. Turn around and walk out of bounds. Tsuburaba obeyed, and Midnight called the match an easy victory for Hitoshi. As Hitoshi started to leave the arena, he heard Present Mike exclaiming in shock over the speakers. What happened? How'd Shinso get his opponent to give up like that? Eraserhead chimed in. That would be Shinso's quirk. I took the liberty of getting the files of all of our finalists so that I would know what to expect. Hitoshi stopped right before the exit. Oh no. He's gonna tell everyone my quirk. Shinso's quirk is called dash. Present Mike interrupted him quickly. You can't do a reveal like that. Give me that. Ahem. Shinso Hitoshi. His quirk, brainwashing. When someone responds to something he says, he can put them into a trance-like state that forces them to do whatever he tells them. But he has to use it intentionally, not every response triggers it. Hitoshi groaned. There goes the element of surprise. But then Present Mike continued. What's this kid doing in general studies? Whether or not the question was rhetorical, Eraserhead answered it. He's in general studies because the entrance exam isn't logical. Shinso's quirk is powerful, and he could obviously become a great hero with it. Did he just say what I think he just said? But it's absolutely useless for fighting robots, so he was forced to take the entrance exam practically quirkless. But don't worry, listeners. Any students who do well enough in the sports festival could get the chance to transfer into the hero course. And somebody's got an empty seat in their class, right, Eraser? Not now, Mike. Hitoshi walked back to his seat. I wish they hadn't revealed my quirk like that, but it sounds like I've already impressed them. Eraserhead even said I could be a great hero. Now I just need to not blow it. His classmates flinched as he passed by, the public display of brainwashing more than enough to make them nervous, but he ignored them and plopped down next to Midoriya. What did you think? Midoriya stopped writing in his notebook and looked over at him. Well, it sounds like you impressed Eraserhead, which is difficult to do from what I've heard, so that's a good sign. And from what I could hear from the heroes in the stands, he wasn't the only one who saw your potential. They both flinched back as a massive glacier suddenly covered half of the arena. Hitoshi stared in awe at his next opponent, who was already thawing out the iceberg he had just created. Now I've just got to survive that. Midoriya gave him a grin and flipped through some of his notes. I might just have some things to help you with that. Hatsume's fight was certainly entertaining. Well, Izuku wasn't entirely sure if fight was the right word. Hatsume was, as planned, using the fight as a giant commercial for hurt babies, and it was hilarious to see how flustered Iida was getting over it. Izuku and Shinso had a hard time not dying of laughter at Iida's face when Hatsume simply stepped out of bounds after almost 10 minutes of completely controlling the fight, having accomplished her goal of showing off all of her inventions. Well, all of her inventions except for the bugs. Alright. Hatsume's impressed the investors, and Shinso's impressed the heroes, so that's goal number 2 accomplished. Now to focus on the other two. Izuku glanced up at the screen to see which fight would be next. Uraraka's next. Hopefully, I'll get to see her use All Might's quirk, but given that she hasn't used it yet, I'm starting to think that either inheriting it is a lengthy process or she doesn't have control of it yet. Or both. Our next competitors might look cute, but don't underestimate these fierce fighters. The hero hopeful who can't wait to prove herself, Uraraka Ochako from Class 1A. And the horse girl from America, Class 1BS Tsunatori Pony. Ochako. Iida's match was hilarious, but it's time to focus. This is your big chance to get noticed by the pros, so don't mess it up. Ochako locked eyes with her opponent as midnight called the start of the match. Immediately, she ran towards Pony, dodged the horns that were launched at her, and pushed against Pony with her outstretched hand, causing her opponent to float back towards the edge of the arena. I got her. Suddenly a horn rushed past Ochako and caught onto Pony's shirt, stopping her from going out of bounds, and pulling her up out of Ochako's reach. Not so fast, opponent. With that, she sent both horns back toward Ochako, and it was all she could do to dodge them. Meanwhile, Pony taunted her from above. It is over. You cannot get up to me. Ochako's mind raced as she dodged the horns. She's right, I can't hit her up there, but how can I get her to come back down? She rolled away from the horns and ran towards Pony. Release. Pony dropped from the sky as Ochako released her quirk, and Ochako grabbed onto her and tossed her out of bounds before she could recover. Tsunatori is out of bounds. Uraraka wins. Ochako was on her way back to the stands when her phone started ringing. She checked who was calling her and brought it to her ear. Hey, Dad. I just want you to know that your mom and I are watching your matches, and we're both amazed at your performance. You made it into the top 8, that's incredible. Ochako smiled at the praise. Thanks, Did. Although, I doubt I'm getting much further in the tournament. I'm up against Iida next, and he's one of the best in my class. Her dad responded with his characteristic optimism, "Don't underestimate my daughter like that. You might surprise yourself. But even if you don't, it doesn't matter. What you've done today is already incredible, and we're proud of you. Okay?" Ochako nodded along with her dad, trying to internalize what he was saying. "Thank you. I should probably go watch the next matches. Talk to you soon." The next 2 matches went exactly the way Izuku had expected. Tokoyami pushed Kaminari out of bounds before the latter could activate his quirk, and Kirishima and Tetsu knocked each other out, so a tiebreaker would be necessary. Given the similarity of their quirks, it wasn't surprising that they were so evenly matched. That doesn't bode too well for Tetsu's future though, because Kirishima's durability should have a much higher ceiling. But enough analyzing. I have my own fight to focus on. For our next match, we've got our other Class 1C underdog, Midoriya Izuku. Against him is the recommendation student whose only limit is her imagination, Yaoyorozu Momo from Class 1A. Izuku glanced across the arena at Yaoyorozu. Her quirk was extremely powerful and gave her far too much versatility for Izuku to plan around, so he knew he had to end the fight before she could make use of it. As soon as the match began, Izuku ran straight for her. She's standing near the edge of the arena, likely to give herself more time to create something before the fight starts. Keeping her distance would be useful in a real fight, but in this scenario, I can definitely exploit that. Yaoyorozu instinctively created a shield to protect herself, so Izuku shifted his stance and slammed into it with his shoulder. Yaoyorozu took a few steps back to steady herself and created a quarterstaff to continue the fight, but it was too late. Yaoyorozu is out of bounds. Midoriya wins. When he saw the look of surprise on Yaoyorozu's face, Izuku briefly felt bad for her, but he pushed that thought down quickly. I needed this victory more than she did. Nothing to feel guilty about. Shota was impressed. The General Studies course is giving us some impressive entries this year. He didn't get much time to mull over the performance, though, as Hisashi was still shouting at Midoriya's surprising victory. "Alright, Eraser, give me that kid's file. I gotta know what his quirk is." Ahem. Midoriya Izuku. His quirk, there was a pause. Eraser, the section's blank. If his bandages would have allowed it, Shota would have face-bombed. "That's because he's quirkless, Mike." He paused to give the audience a moment to digest what he just said. A quirkless General Studies just beat out one of my recommendation students. Kid's smart. After finishing up commentary and going to an ad break, Hisashi muted his mic and turned to Shota. "So, what do you think, Sho? 2 promising General Studies students, and only 1 empty spot in your class. Who gets it? Or are you planning to expel another student to make room? Or I could just leave the seat empty. I've done it before." Shota sighed. "It's still early, but I think Shinso has more potential. First off, out of the 2 of them, only Shinso applied for the hero course, so it's illogical to just assume Midoriya wants to transfer in. Also, Midoriya's analytical skills seem perfectly suited to becoming a hero analyst, so while he could make it as a hero, he's much better off in his current course. Shinso, on the other hand, has a quirk that could only be legally utilized if he became a hero. That reminds me." Hisashi interrupted. "Why'd you reveal how his quirk worked? It robbed him of a pretty massive advantage." Shota looked out at the stage before replying. "I want to see how he adapts. I can tell his quirk's powerful by looking at his file, but a pro can't just have one trick. He needs to be able to function without it if he's going to make it in the hero course." For our last match of the first round, we've got the blonde bomb himself, Class 1 as Bakugo Katsuki. And against him, a copycat out to prove his class's worth, Class 1 BS Monoma Nito. Katsuki was excited to let out some frustration in this match. The sports festival had been as much of an embarrassment as the rest of his year at UA, so he was even more pissed off than normal. At least he'd be fighting Deku next round, so he'd get to put the damn nerd in his place soon. Now he just had to get through the blonde bastard. Begin! Both students rushed at each other, Katsuki launching an explosive right hook. When the blonde bastard appeared through the smoke, unharmed and made of steel, he was too surprised to dodge the punch to his jaw, and the follow-up explosion sent him flying, barely able to stay in the ring. The blonde bastard somehow looked more smug than usual. I got Tetsu to let me borrow his quirk before our match. I figured it would be the perfect way to get close to you. Don't worry though, I swapped it out for yours. After all, what better way to prove Class 1 BS superiority than to beat you with your own quirk? Ha! His laughter was cut short, however, as he realized that Katsuki was also laughing. What a fucking moron. Do you really think you can use my quirk better than me? Ah, this is gonna be even more fun than I thought. Katsuki used a small explosion in both hands to launch himself towards the blonde bastard, using a second pair of blasts to fly over his head to dodge the explosion launched at him. Once he was behind the bastard, he used a small explosion aimed away to stop his momentum and used his other hand to unleash a massive blast on the boy's back. Die. Izuku wasn't sure how to feel as he watched Kaken's fight. On the one hand, it was cathartic to watch someone else get taken down by Kaken. But on the other hand, the fight really made Kaken look good. Up until now, someone watching could assume that Kaken was just blessed with a powerful quirk, but while that is true, this fight demonstrates how completely Kaken has mastered his power. Monoma's just using it as if it's a cannon on his arm, pointing and shooting. Kaken's using it to attack, evade, engage, and conceal his presence. He continued his muttering as Kaken finally launched his opponent out of the ring. Fighting him is going to be worse than I thought, but given how much I know about his quirk, I have as good a chance as anyone. He felt a tap on his shoulder and looked over to see Shinso looking over at him. This means you'll be facing your old bully next, right? Are you all right? Izuku nodded. I'm as ready as I'm going to be. How about you? Your match against Todoroki is next, after all. Shinso shrugged. You've already given me a strategy for him. I think I've got a real chance to beat him. And, as satisfying as it would be to take down the number 2 hero's brat, I've already impressed Eraserhead, so as long as I don't embarrass myself, I should be all right. With that, he turned to leave. I better go get ready. Wish me luck. We've got an exciting fight for you to start off quarterfinals. Up first, it's the underdog who's seized minds and stolen hearts, Class 1's Shinso Hitoshi. And against him, the legacy hero who won his last match with an overwhelming display of power, Class 1 as Todoroki Shodo. Hitoshi forced himself to take a deep breath as he walked into the arena. He had already done well at getting noticed by heroes. But if I'm here, I might as well go all the way, right? And Midoriya's strategy was obviously his best chance at that. It just felt a little underhanded. Like it was something a villain would do. He heard midnight countdown to start the match, and he pushed back his hesitation. If he wanted to win, he needed to use whatever advantage he could get. So, your endeavors, brat. What's it like having everything handed to you on a silver platter? Shodo had heard Present Mike explain Shinso's quirk, and he knew that his opponent was just trying to get him to respond so he could brainwash him. So as much as he wanted to tell him his life had been far from easy, he instead sent a wave of ice at his opponent as soon as midnight started the match. To his surprise, the boy dodged it, getting to Shodo's left. Weirdly, Shinso didn't try to get in close, instead taking the chance to shout at him again. I mean, ignoring the fame and fortune, look at the quirk you were handed. My whole life, people have said that my quirk makes me a villain, but look at you. I bet everyone always told you how incredible a hero you would make, right? Shoto gritted his teeth. That's the problem. If my quirk weren't so perfect, my old man wouldn't have felt the need to put me through hell. He fired off another wave of ice, but having to turn to get his right side facing Shinso gave his opponent more than enough time to get out of the way. That gave Shinso more time to get under his skin. I mean, we're all out here giving it everything we've got, and you haven't even used half your quirk? What? Is that the only way you could keep this tournament interesting? I'm doing this to prove to my damn old man that I don't need his stupid quirk. Shinso somehow knew all the right things to say to get Shoto upset, so Shoto knew he needed to end the fight quickly before he accidentally responded. So if the boy kept dodging his long-range attacks, he'd have to get in close. He sent out another wall of ice, sliding along it as his opponent dodged to get in close. As he was sliding, however, Shinso managed to grab Shoto's left arm and attempted to throw him out of bounds. Shoto was barely able to throw up a wall of ice to keep himself in the ring. Shinso moved carefully towards Shoto's left while starting another rant. I've got to ask, what's it like to get what you want without having to fight for it? I wouldn't know. I've been fighting my whole life. Shoto swung at Shinso with his right arm, forcing him back and leaving him vulnerable to the pillar of ice Shoto created as his hand hit the ground. His opponent was frozen similar to how Shiro had been. It's over. Shoto glared at his opponent. You know nothing about dashed. His entire body froze up, and fog covered his mind as he realized that Midnight hadn't called the match. The fight wasn't over, and he was now completely at his opponent's mercy. Shinso smirked. That was close. Now, how about you turn around and walk out of bounds? Shoto felt his body obey. I can't lose. I have to stop him. As Shoto pushed back, trying to find some way to wrest control from his opponent, he activated his quirk without thinking. His whole quirk. Half of his body burst into flames, and the chilled air around him suddenly heated, expanding with enough force to create a small explosion that sent him sprawling. And as he hit the ground, the flames faded, and he felt control of his body return to him. He walked back to Shinso, who was once again shouting at him to get him to respond, and wordlessly put a hand over his mouth. Only then did Midnight call the match. Shinso is incapacitated. Todoroki wins. It was only as Todoroki started to thaw Shinso out of the ice that he realized he had broken his promise to himself. I had him. After changing into a dry set of clothes, Hitoshi made his way back to his seat and was ranting to Midoriya about his loss. I had him brainwashed, but he still had enough control to make an explosion? I call bullshit. Midoriya laughed at the outburst, but then adopted a more thoughtful expression. I wouldn't get too worried about losing. I'd give Todoroki a 50-50 chance of winning the whole festival, and you actually forced him to use his fire. No one else has done that all year. Hitoshi was about to respond when his phone started buzzing. When he saw who was calling him, he quickly excused himself and found a less crowded area to answer. Hi, Mrs. Egamura. I'm guessing you were watching that. He heard a chuckle from the phone. Of course I was. I know how important today is for you. I wasn't about to miss it. There was a pause before she kept speaking. Now, I know you're probably beating yourself up about losing, so let me just say, don't. You did amazing to get as far as you did, and if they don't let you into the hero course after today, then they must be blind. Hitoshi smiled at her reassurance. Thank you, but that actually isn't what I'm beating myself up about. Since my opponent knew my quirk, I knew it wasn't going to be easy to get him to respond to anything I said, so I tried to get under his skin. Every word I said in that fight was designed to make him angry, and I feel like a villain for doing it. Mrs. Egamura's response was quick. What else were you supposed to do? Fight him quirkless. If you're worried about being too mean to be a hero, I doubt you could be any worse than that blonde boy with the explosions. That got a laugh out of Hitoshi. You're right, though I probably shouldn't be aiming for his standard. Thanks for the reassurance though. He could almost feel her smile through the phone. Anytime, Hitoshi. Shoto should have expected his old man to be waiting outside the arena, but that didn't mean he was ready for the smug look on his old man's face. Finally, you've given up on that childish tantrum of yours. With that distraction out of the dash. I haven't given up on anything. Shoto glared at him. And I haven't decided to use my fire again. It's just that, for a brief moment, I forgot you existed. While his old man reeled from those words, Shoto slipped away, only to be immediately caught by Bakugo. I can't seem to catch a break today. What do you want? Bakugo practically shouted his response. You better use your fire against me. When I beat you, I need it to be a real victory, so no holding back. Shoto tried to get past Bakugo. That's assuming we even fight each other. We wouldn't face off until the final round. Bakugo grabbed his left arm before he could fully get away. We will, half and half. And if you don't give me everything you've got, I'll fucking murder you. Having had the last word, Bakugo stomped off. Shoto stared at Bakugo as he left. Both of you can go to hell. I lost control against Shinso, but I won't let it happen again. Ochako readied herself as Midnight counted their match in. I doubt I can beat Iida, but I've got to give it my best shot. She forced a nervous smile onto her face. No hard feelings, right, Iida? He shook his head. Of course not, Uraraka. I expect you to do your best here. Iida entered a runner's stance. And I will give my best as well. After the embarrassment that was last round, I cannot afford to lose here. May the best hero win. And with that he was off, running towards Ochako as fast as he could. She activated her quirk on herself to leap over his head, releasing it to land behind him. She tried to tap him on the head as she came down, but he moved out of the way faster than she had expected. Not giving Iida time to attack again, Ochako rushed toward him, hand outstretched. Iida dodged the first few swings, then grabbed Ochako's wrist and started to run, pulling her to the edge and tossing her over. Uraraka is out of bounds. Iida wins. Ochako lay on the ground for a few moments. Well, the best hero won. She opened her eyes to see Iida holding out a hand to her. Are you all right? She gladly took the help up. I'm fine. Good job, Iida, you're in the final four now. They started to walk back to the stands together. I bet Ingenium's real proud, watching your performance. Iida smiled at that. He's actually out on a mission right now. Hopefully, by the time he is done, I will be able to tell him I won the tournament. He won his first sports festival after all. They returned to their seats, amid congratulation for Iida and consolation for Ochako, and sat down to watch the next match. Ingenium was pinned to the ground as the hero killer stood over him. As hard as he tried, he couldn't move a muscle, so he was forced to lie there helplessly as Stain ranted about fake heroes or something. How could I be careless enough to let this happen? I should have known better than to go off on my own, and now I'm helpless against whatever the hero killer's gonna do to me. Given the name, I have a good guess as to what that is. I'm sorry, Tenya. The hero killer stabbed down. I should have been stronger. As soon as the match started, Aijiro started running toward Tokoyami. The other boy was content to hang back and let Dark Shadow do the fighting, so unmanly, so Aijiro needed to get in close if he wanted to win. As Dark Shadow closed in on him, he knocked it aside with a hardened punch, only for it to turn back in and grab his other arm. Before Aijiro had time to react, it chucked him out of the ring. Kirishima is out of bounds. Tokoyami wins. For our last match of the quarterfinals, we've got a match of opposites. The kid who didn't even need a quirk to make it to this point, Class 1 CS Midoriya Izuku. And the boy whose quirk rocketed him to the top of the hero course, Class 1 as Bakugo Katsuki. As Izuku walked onto the field, his brain was screaming at him that this was a terrible idea. This is Kaken we're talking about. I've only just gathered the courage to talk back to him. How am I supposed to fight him? He glanced at Kaken, who seemed even more furious with him than usual. Part of Izuku wanted to just walk out of the ring and rob him of the fight he was obviously looking forward to, but he quickly dismissed the idea. I need to do this. I need to face him. I need to prove that I'm not the same scared middle schooler he bullied. I've been training, I've been strategizing, and I've got a real chance to win this. Now to show him just how much he's underestimated me all these years. Izuku swallowed his fear and forced a smirk onto his face. It looks like I can stand in the same ring as you after all. Kaken was about to respond when Midnight started the match. Immediately, Izuku ran straight for Kaken. After my last match, he'll be wary if I stay on the edge of the ring, and I need him to start the fight on autopilot. As Kaken threw a right hook towards him, he still always starts with that right hook. Izuku caught it and threw the other boy over his shoulder. As Kaken quickly got back to his feet, Izuku took a moment to savor present mix reaction to the move. And our underdog starts the match decisively, perfectly predicting and countering his opponent's opener. Furious at present mix comment, Kaken immediately sent off another explosion at Izuku. Don't you dare think you can make a fool of me, you damn nerd. Izuku dodged the blow and jammed an elbow into Kaken's stomach in response, the elbow pad increasing the impact. Kaken stumbled back. This is risky, but I can't let him recover. Izuku rushed after him to press the advantage. Not so useless now, am I? Ducking under another swing from Kaken, Izuku sent an uppercut straight to the other boy's jaw. That's where things started to go wrong. Izuku dodged another swing from Kaken, only for it to be a feint, and his legs were swept out from under him. Kaken wasted no time as Izuku hit the floor, slamming a hand down on his stomach and causing it to explode. Die, Deku! Kaken sent another hand down, but Izuku managed to roll out of its way and get back to his feet. Izuku tried to steady himself. Not holding back, huh? Kaken scoffed. Why the fuck would I be? He's regained control of the fight and he's all warmed up. I'm not winning this, but I can at least make it a show. Izuku smirked again. I'm just wondering what it says about you if you have to go all out against a quirkless loser like me. That comment made Kaken fly into a rage, sending off explosion after explosion at Izuku. They were too big for Izuku to dodge, so he was launched back and forth across the ring, but not out of bounds. Not yet. Kaken wasn't done with him yet. It was hard to hear anything over the sound of Kaken's explosions, but Izuku could just make out the noise of the crowd booing Kaken's actions. Stop toying with the boy. Just finish the match, you bully. Even present Mike had something to say about it. Come on, kid. Get it over with and send the poor guy out of bounds. Despite the pain, Izuku smiled. That's right, everyone. Behold the bully pretending to be a hero. Kaken heard them too, and he glanced around the stands in confusion, clearly thrown off balance by the unexpected response. Izuku glanced back at how close to the edge he had been pushed and realized he might still have a chance at winning the match. You know, Kaken, if I didn't know any better, I'd say they didn't like you. Kaken turned to him and ran forward in a rage, and Izuku braced himself to catch the right hook he knew was coming and to throw Kaken over his shoulder and out of the ring. But Kaken detonated his fist while still out of Izuku's reach, letting off the largest explosion Izuku had ever seen him produce. Die! The force of the blast sent Izuku flying out of the arena, almost all of the way to the wall. Izuku barely heard Midnight declaring his defeat before consciousness failed him. That was concerning. All Might felt confident that Aizawa would be speaking to young Bakugo, as his performance in that match was in no way befitting a hero. As for the other boy, All Might had seen him on UA's campus a handful of times and couldn't shake the feeling that he knew him from somewhere. But then, during the fight, it finally clicked. He was the fanboy who discovered my weakened form by accident and asked if he could be a hero without a quirk. With his cleverness and determination, he would have made a great hero if he had one. Actually, I suppose I could. Young Uraraka will make a fine successor. I just need to wait for her to be ready to accept my power. Tamura stared at the screen intently. He had been watching the sports festival in hopes of seeing the 1A brats get destroyed, so their success had been rather disappointing. But there were other factors that kept Tamura's interest. The general studies students were so much fun to watch, especially the quirkless one. The heroes seemed to have no idea how to react to him. And with the determination he just demonstrated in his last fight, Tamura was sure the boy loved to help them destroy the system that had no doubt beaten him down his whole life. Kurojairi, bring that Midoriya brat here after the festival. I want to recruit him to our party. Katsuki ignored the commentators as he walked off the field. I put that damn nerd in his place. Despite his victory, the crowd's response nagged at him. What the hell was those extras' problem? Izuku deserved what I gave him. He should have known better than to get in my way. Anyway, who cares what they say? I showed Deku I'm the best, and that's all that matters. He paused. But, of course I beat him. I'm me, and he's a quirkless loser. And if I had to go that hard against someone like him, what does that say about me? Ochako walked down from the stands to meet Iida on his way back. He was so close to beating Todoroki. I'm sure he's super disappointed, so it's time for me to be a supportive friend. As she turned a corner, however, she saw Iida talking on his phone, visibly shaken. Is he crying? That can't just be from the match. What happened? I'll be right there. Iida put his phone in his pocket, took a breath to steady himself, and finally noticed Ochako was there. Uraraka, how long were you there? Ochako noticed Iida's expression immediately freeze up, as he tried to pretend everything was all right. She put a reassuring hand on his arm. Are you okay? Do you need any help? Iida put on a smile that Ochako could clearly tell was fake. I'm all right, Uraraka. Actually, if you could inform one of the teachers that I need to leave, it would be much appreciated. There has been a family emergency and I have to go. With that, he left, not even glancing back. Ochako stared at him before going to find a teacher. A family emergency? What happened? Katsuki pulled against the chain holding him to the podium as All Might passed out the medals. Damn it. How dare these extras pretend that that sloppy performance I gave is worth celebrating? I didn't get a single real victory in the whole damn festival. I got third in the obstacle course and cavalry battle, even Deku beat me. Of course I beat the blonde bastard when he decided to use my quirk. I've got a decade more experience with it than him. And Deku's just a quirkless nerd, so beating him isn't impressive. That fight shouldn't have been nearly as close as it was. Birdbrain's quirk is weak to mine, so that one doesn't count either. And Half and Half didn't even try to use his fire against me, he held back, and that means he would have won if he went all out. I didn't do shit today, so stop acting like I won. All Might reached over to put the medal on Katsuki, and even the number 1 hero struggled to place it around Katsuki's neck. Don't give me that fucking medal. Don't mock me, acting like I'm the best when today obviously proves I'm not. As Izuku woke up, he noticed Shinso sitting nearby. His friend smirked as Izuku shifted up. Good morning, Sleeping Beauty. Izuku let out a small laugh as he let himself out of bed. Good morning to you too, Prince Charming. So, what did I miss? Well, the awards ceremony finished 10 minutes ago. Bakugo beat Todoroki for the top spot, but I'm still the only one to get him to use his fire, so Bakugo was pissed. They had to chain him to the podium for the awards. I'll have to watch that when I get home. That'll be satisfying to see. Shinso's expression shifted, turning into a wide grin. Also, Eraserhead said he wanted to talk to me before I left. We did it. I impressed him. Izuku gave Shinso a matching smile, hiding the twinge of jealousy he felt. That's awesome. Do you want me to go with you? Shinso waved him off. No, it's all right. It might take a while. I'll text you what he says. Izuku got cleared to leave by Recovery Girl and started to head home. He checked his phone. His mom had texted him a few times to ask if he was all right, and started to go over the day in his head. Today was a success. I completed all the goals I set out to. Kaken showed everyone how much of a bully he is during our fight. Apparently, he lost it again during the awards ceremony, so everyone should be able to tell how unworthy he is of becoming a hero. Hatsume got to show off all of her inventions. Shinso impressed Eraserhead and is well on his way to transferring into the hero course. And I proved I'm not useless. Right? I made it to the top 8, there's no way that wasn't enough. He paused. Then why don't I feel like it wasn't enough? Izuku sighed. Because it wasn't. Izuku had imagined All Might walking up to him after the festival, apologizing for overlooking him, maybe even choosing him over Uraraka to be his successor, but it was clear that that wouldn't happen. Shinso's on his way to the hero course and I'm not. Despite everything I did, no one believes I can be a hero. Everyone still thinks I'm useless. He was so caught up in his train of thought that he didn't notice the purple portal appearing in front of him until it was too late. Shinso Hitoshi. I have to say, your performance today was impressive. Hitoshi stood facing Eraserhead, trying to be as respectful as possible. A pro hero is giving you a chance. Do not blow this. Thank you, sir. Eraserhead continued. The decision to let someone into the hero course isn't based solely on what you pull off in one day, but after that display, you've definitely gotten your foot in the door. You might have heard about the upcoming internships. Your class will be interning with news agencies, the staff of hero agencies, etc. But if you want to transfer into the hero course, you'll be interning with me. It'll help me get a better picture of your potential, as well as what you can do without your analyst helping you from the sidelines. Hitoshi nodded along as Eraserhead spoke but was startled at the mention of his friend. You noticed that? Eraserhead gave a light chuckle. Of course I did. It's my job to pay attention. Don't worry, you aren't in trouble. There's nothing wrong with getting help from your friends, though I will need to see what you're capable of doing on your own. With that, Eraserhead turned to leave. Anyway, that's all I wanted to tell you. I don't waste my time on people who don't have potential, so make sure you don't disappoint me. Hitoshi gave a hurried bow after him. Thank you, Eraserhead, sir. I won't let you down. I'm so close. I can actually achieve my dream. Izuku collapsed into a bar he had never seen before. Wait, what happened? I was just walking home. How did I get here? Midoriya Izuku. I want to have a chat with you. Izuku turned to the voice and saw a young man with pale skin, pale hair, and a detached hand stuck on his face. Behind him stood a well-dressed figure who seemed to be made entirely of purple smoke. Wait, I feel like I recognize them from somewhere. They're the villains from the USJ. What do they want from me? He started to slowly inch backward when the villain spoke again. Don't worry, kid, if I wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead. Yeesh, I was hoping you'd have a little more fight in you than this. Izuku stopped inching back. He could kill me if he wanted, so I probably shouldn't do anything to make him change his mind. Besides, with that warp villain hanging around, I doubt I could escape. He took in a deep breath and tried to keep any panic out of his voice. What do you want from me? The villain, who Izuku was pretty sure was called Shigaraki, took a step forward, and Izuku fought back the instinct to recoil. I found most of the sports festival pretty boring, just some hero brats showing off their flashy quirks, but I had a blast watching you. Showing up those hero brats and leaving the hero announcer speechless, it was damn impressive. Especially without a quirk to fall back on. Not that society's going to acknowledge that. They'll make some excuse for your success, call you lucky, anything to keep their quirk supremacist views intact. And in a week, everyone will have forgotten. You'll have to start back from level 1. What's he getting at? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with everyone discounting your strengths just because you have an extra joint in your pinky toe? Or do you want to do something about it? Tear down the society that made your life a living hell? If so, join me. Your skills will definitely come in handy. Izuku stared up at him in surprise. That wasn't what he was expecting to hear. He considered Shigaraki's offer. He thinks I'm useful. He sees past my quirklessness. His conscience screamed at him. Izuku no. He's crazy. He tried to kill All Might, remember? No way can you work with him. Who cares about All Might? He didn't even give me a second glance. No one did, until now. It's not too late, you could still transfer into the hero course. If they were going to let me transfer, they would have told me already. They told Shinso. Izuku, this guy's a murderer. Are you really willing to help someone like that? What if I can keep him in check? Be his better angel? There's no way that works. What if it does? What would Mom think? She doesn't need to know. I'm doing this. I accept. Shigaraki's grin widened, much more creepy. Then reassuring. Good choice. Things would have gotten messy otherwise. Oh, what about that brainwasher, Shinso? Do you think your boyfriend would be interested in joining us? Izuku stammered. He's not my dash, that's beside the point. There's no way I'm getting Shinso involved with this. I highly doubt it. He's been told his whole life that his quirk makes him a villain by default, so he'd refuse your offer out of spite, if for no other reason. That's a shame. He seemed like a useful party member. Shigaraki waved dismissively. All right, that'll be all. When we need you, we'll get in touch. Kurogyri, send him back. And with that, the bar disappeared. Izuku opened the door softly, exhausted physically from the sports festival, and exhausted emotionally from his meeting with the League of Villains. Immediately, his mom rushed toward him to wrap him up in a hug. Izuku! Izuku tiredly returned the embrace. Don't worry, Mom, I'm all right. Recovery girl gave me the all clear. Noticing tears streaking down his mother's face and glancing at the empty tissue boxes around the couch, Izuku assumed she had done a lot of crying that day. Izuku, what you did today was reckless, and it terrified me, so please don't ever do that again. Izuku inwardly groaned at his mother's scolding. Of course. I'm still just a fragile quirkless boy after all. But she wasn't finished. But it was also incredible. Wait, what? You were so strong and brave, and you showed everyone just how special you are. So as much as I was worried today, I was also so proud. Wait, what? Shocked by his mother's words, Izuku pulled himself tighter into her embrace, tears starting to pour at the unexpected praise. And in his mother's arms, the weight of what he had done that day caught up to him, and he wept, desperately hoping he had made the right choice. And then Bakugo wanted to team up with me, and I was shocked. UA gave its students a week off after the sports festival, so Ochako had taken the opportunity to go back home and spend the week with her parents. She was currently in the process of going over the whole sports festival with them over dinner. Her dad chimed in. He certainly seemed like a piece of work, but I guess no one's immune to my daughter's charm. Ochako let out a laugh at his exaggerated praise. It's so nice to be back home. This past month has been crazy, with USJ, the sports festival, and All Might's offer. I'm glad I can just relax for a week. Hopefully, everything will calm down soon. She looked up to continue her story, but stopped short as she noticed the TV out of the corner of her eye. The news was on, and they were talking about Ingenium, Iida's brother. Izuku turned on his computer. The League of Villains had already given him his first assignment. Track down the hero killer Stain and arrange a meeting between him and Shigaraki. Izuku had thought hard about it, and he decided that it was an acceptable task. It was basically just extending the plan he had about being Shigaraki's better angel to Stain. But if Izuku was going to find the hero killer, he first needed to do some research. Fortunately, there was a lot of information on the hero killer out there. A little digging gave Izuku Stain's ideology, which actually made sense to him. Plenty of heroes were heroes for the wrong reasons like fame and fortune. I mean, all Kaken wants to do is prove he's the best. That's not very heroic. But when Izuku looked at Stain's list of victims, he couldn't get the two to fit together. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for his choice of targets. Some of these heroes are extremely noble, like Ingenium. If any hero deserved this, it certainly wasn't him. Filing that detail away for later, Izuku returned to looking for Stain's location. He tends to target several heroes in the same area before moving on, and Ingenium was the first hero he went after in Hosu, so he'll probably be there for some time. That's a good start, but I'll need to get closer if I want to find him. The upcoming internships should be a good excuse to be in that area, and Hatsume's bugs should help me locate him. With a plan in place, he closed his tabs and shut off his computer. What else do I need? I should probably refresh myself on the heroes who operate in that area. Izuku. His mom's voice pulled him out of his internal monologue. I know you can lose track of time when you're focused on heroes, but if you don't leave soon, you'll be late. Alright. That's today. He grabbed the hero notebook with Hosu's heroes in it and rushed out of his room. His mom was waiting for him with a small container of cookies. Make sure you give these to Shinso. And thank him for me. Tenya sat by Tensei's side as his brother slept. It had been almost 2 days since Tensei had been injured, and Tenya had barely left his side in that time. How could this happen? Tensei's the greatest hero, his story cannot end here. I cannot let it. His phone buzzed, and he saw that Uraraka texted him. Uraraka, I saw the news. I'm so sorry. Do you need someone to talk to? I see they have finally announced that Tensei was paralyzed. Tenya briefly considered taking her up on her offer. She clearly cares, she would probably even be willing to help me. But no. She has fought enough of my battles. I need to do this on my own. I need to avenge Tensei on my own. Tenya sent a text saying he was alright, and he returned to watching over his sleeping brother. Katsuki sat back down on his bed. Shitty Hair and his other classmates had invited him to hang out and celebrate the sports festival. Even the extras from middle school had tried to get in touch so they could brag about knowing him. But he just wanted to be left alone. Even with his amazing quirk, and all the work he had put into it, he wasn't good enough. He wasn't strong enough. The sports festival was an embarrassment, and everyone was acting like it was a victory for him just made it worse. Patronizing him with a worthless medal that he knew for a fact he hadn't earned. He had been rushing towards the sports festival with everything he had, knowing it was the best chance he had to prove his worth, but it hadn't been enough. He had let himself down. And now he was stuck with a question he hadn't ever needed to ask before. What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm not strong enough? My whole life I've thought I was the best, what if I was wrong? Hitoshi hadn't ever done something like this, so he was understandably nervous. But Mrs. Egamura had insisted that they couldn't properly celebrate his success in the sports festival without his friends, so she had him invite them to the house for a celebratory dinner. I have friends coming to my house. I'm told this is normal, so there's no reason to panic. He was sitting on the couch, petting checkers, when the doorbell rang. Scooping up his cat, he walked over to the door, taking a deep breath before opening it to reveal Midoriya. He was holding a container of cookies and had some sort of notebook peeking out of the pocket of his hoodie jacket. Hitoshi gestured into the apartment. Hey Midoriya. Make yourself at home, I guess? Midoriya followed him in, placing the cookies on the table. These are from my mom. She says thanks. Hitoshi picked one of them out and started eating. Thanks for what? Midoriya looked slightly embarrassed to answer the question. For being my friend. Hitoshi paused with the cookie halfway to his mouth. Still not used to that. Luckily, Mrs. Egamura entered the room before he had to answer. Must be Midoriya. I'm Egamura Eri. I've heard so much about you from Hitoshi. She pointed a finger at Hitoshi, who was still eating a cookie. Hitoshi, no dessert before dinner. Hitoshi scarfed down the rest of the cookie as Midoriya replied to Mrs. Egamura. It's nice to meet you. Oh, your eyes are fascinating. Do they have something to do with your quirk? Mrs. Egamura smiled at the comment. I see Hitoshi wasn't exaggerating about how observant you are. You're spot on. My quirk lets me see the emotional states of the people around me. It came in handy back when I was teaching. Not to mention how useful it was and is for my own boys. At that moment, the doorbell rang, so Mrs. Egamura went to answer it. Midoriya turned to Hitoshi. Mrs. Egamura seems nice. She's your? I never explained this, did I? She's my foster mom. Her own kids are all grown up, so after her husband passed away, she felt like she needed some company. And if she could get a kid out of a bad living situation, that's a win-win. Mrs. Egamura returned with Hatsume, who was as energetic as usual. I'm super excited for Purple to start in the hero course so that I can make his babies. As Mrs. Egamura looked at him with confusion, Hitoshi buried his face in his cat. That's what she calls her inventions. Mrs. Egamura let out a chuckle at the whole exchange before excusing herself to let the friends hang out together. Hatsume wasted no time in starting the conversation. Green, purple, have you seen it yet? Hitoshi was not even remotely surprised that he had no idea what Hatsume was talking about. Have we seen what? She pulled out her phone to show something to both of them. It was a pin with silver lining and a green interior of a curly-haired figure flying on what looked like a shooting star. Is it? Midoriya spoke up first. Is that supposed to be me? Hatsume grinned. Bingo! I found it while I was looking for some design inspiration. Turns out your performance inspired some other quirkless teens and even some with weak quirks. These little things haven't become too popular, but you've got yourself a couple of dedicated fans. Midoriya looked like he was about to cry just from that. Hitoshi gave him a friendly shoulder punch. Nice job, man. Even I didn't make that big of an impression. The evening went better than Hitoshi had expected. It was nice to hang out with his friends and celebrate their shared success. It was also hilarious to watch Hatsume and Checkers absolutely not get along. As the evening progressed, Hitoshi was reminded that he had somehow made some good friends at UA. At one point, Midoriya went to the bathroom, and Hitoshi noticed that he left his notebook behind. Overcome by curiosity, Hitoshi picked it up and flipped through a few of the pages. With all this practice, it's no wonder Midoriya's so good at analysis. This is impressive. That was when Midoriya got back. Shinso, what are you doing? Shinso nervously put down the notebook. Sorry. It's just cool seeing your thought process written down. One question though, who's this one? He pointed at a costume that looked like a smiling rabbit. I don't recognize him. Midoriya snatched the notebook, embarrassed. That's because he isn't a pro hero. Back when I wanted to be a hero, that's what I wanted my costume to look like. Hitoshi glanced at him with surprise. Really? It's a cool design. I'll have to keep it in mind. Eventually, the time came for everyone to head home, and Hitoshi stood at the door for a few moments. Checkers returned to curl around his legs now that Hatsume was gone, and Mrs. Egamura walked up beside him. You've made some nice friends, Hitoshi. I'm proud of you. You're Midoriya from the sports festival, right? Izuku started in surprise. It had been a week since the sports festival, so he hadn't expected people to still care about his performance enough to try and talk to him on the train. He looked at the speaker. She looked to be a few years older than him and didn't have any especially distinctive features, no evidence of any quirk, just straight black hair, brown eyes, etc. She wore baggy clothes, and on her jacket was the silver and green pin of Izuku. Hatsume wasn't joking. Some people really were inspired. Recognizing the pin, Izuku nodded. I am. How can I help you? Autographs? Is that how this works? She smiled at that. It's great to meet you. I'm Iida Kakumiai, and I just wanted to say your performance was inspiring to quirkless people like me across the country. Quirkless people like her. So, if you ever want to send a message out to your fans, she handed him a card with a phone number on it, let me know. I've got connections for it. And a message from you could definitely get something going. She gave him a wink at that. Something big. Iida got off at the next station, leaving Izuku to think about the offer. That sounded far from innocent. It almost sounded like she wants me to help her start a revolution of some sort. Which I guess isn't too different from what I'm planning to do with the league. I'll have to hold on to this number. It could be useful to have someone on my side. Ochako made sure to get to UA early for their first day back. She knew Iida would be the first one in the classroom, so she was hoping she could talk to him before school started. Because there was no way he didn't need someone to talk to after what had happened. Sure enough, Iida was waiting alone as she walked into homeroom. Ah, Uraraka. It is good to see you again. I trust you had a good break. He's trying to avoid the topic. Ochako pushed through his comment. Iida. If this is about my brother, Iida interrupted her, there is nothing to worry about. I am fine. Ochako hesitated. I don't believe that, but why would he lie? He trusted me with his feelings after the USJ, so he'd tell me if he wasn't okay, right? Are you sure? Iida nodded stoically. I'm quite sure. I have come to terms with what happened over the past week. Ochako nodded, putting down her bag by her seat. If you say so. Shoto stared down at his list of offers. He was surprised to have received more offers from Bakugo, given that Bakugo had beaten him. Not that the number of offers actually mattered. A vast majority of them weren't even worth considering. Still, everyone who had finished in the top 4 had received some impressive offers. Tokoyami received an offer from Hawks, Bakugo from Best Jeanist, and Iida from Crust. And of course, at the top of his page was his old man. Endeavor. Shoto didn't consider that offer for a moment. He already spent too much time around the bastard, and ever since the sports festival, things had gotten worse between the two of them. Endeavor was furious with Shoto for only getting second in the sports festival. It probably reminded him of how he's always stuck in second place. He had been trying and get Shoto to use his fire with some especially intense training sessions. But Shoto resisted any attempt to make him use his old man's power. He was hoping internships would be a good opportunity to get away from that for once. So, after looking through the offers briefly, Shoto decided to intern with Kamui Woods. A competent hero with enough prestige to not be browbeaten by his old man into rescinding his offer. So, where's everyone spending their internships? Izuku looked up from his food as Shinso asked the question. I'm going to be interning with Eraserhead, since he wants to get a better picture of my potential or whatever, but I'm curious about what you two will be doing. Unsurprisingly, Hatsume answered first. I got an offer to intern at Island. I'll get to see their process, I'll have access to their tools, I'll make so many wonderful babies. Izuku followed her up. I'll be interning with an analyst who works for the Hero Manual. Shinso racked his brain for a moment. Who's he? I don't think I've heard of him. That's not too surprising, Izuku explained. He's not too popular or too highly ranked, but he has a good relationship with his analyst. A lot of top-ranked heroes don't even have analysts, because they trust their own analysis more, I guess. Of course, that wasn't the real reason Izuku was interning there. The League of Villains wanted him to find Stain, and Stain was in Hosu, so Izuku needed to be in Hosu. And, unlike hero students, he'd only be at his internship for a few hours a day, which gave him more than enough time to have his bugs search for Stain. He was relieved to hear that his friends wouldn't be in Hosu. Having classmates in the line of fire would make everything far more complicated. Tenya left the moment the final bell rang. Under normal circumstances, as class representative, he would have stayed until after his classmates all left, but he did not have it in him today. It had been a trial to keep all of his emotions hidden for the entire day, so he did not trust himself to remain around his classmates for any longer than necessary. He thought back to Uraraka asking him if he was alright. It hurt him to lie to her like that, but he did not have much of a choice. If she knew how he was feeling and what he planned to do, she would try to stop him. Or even worse, she could try and help him. And he could not let her do that. He needed to avenge his brother. And he needed to do it alone. Fortunately, he had a plan for that. One of the heroes who had given him an offer was Manuel, and while he was far from the most high-profile hero who wanted Tenya to intern with them, he worked in Hosu. Once he was in Hosu, all Tenya needed to do was get lucky and find the hero killer. And with vengeance on his side, he was certain that he would. Ochako looked around the train station at all of her excited classmates and couldn't quite manage to match their enthusiasm. It's not that she wasn't excited, she was. She was interning with Gunhead and was excited to improve her subpar fighting skills. But outweighing that excitement was worry. Iida still seemed distant, and he still wasn't telling any of them what was wrong. So she approached him before he boarded his train. Iida, if something was wrong, like seriously wrong, you'd tell me, right? Iida looked back at her. Of course, Uraraka. But as I said, I am quite all right. And without another word, he boarded his train. In the coming days, Ochako would deeply regret letting him leave. Tenya closed his eyes as he took his seat on the train. He had finally gotten free of his classmates, so he could now focus entirely on his mission. The hero killer will pay for what he's done. Iida Tenya, right? Tenya opened his eyes to glance at the speaker. He looked to be the same age as Tenya, and he was wearing a UA uniform. It took him a moment to recognize the boy as Midoriya, the quirkless kid from the sports festival. Can I help you? Midoriya looked over at the empty seat across from him. Do you mind if I sit here? Tenya nodded stoically. If you wish. The train ride shouldn't be too long. I can be polite for the duration of it. Midoriya placed his bag by the seat, making some small talk as he sat down. So where are you interning? Tenya kept his response short. Manual in Hosu. Midoriya raised an eyebrow in surprise at that. What a coincidence. I'm interning with his analyst. Pleasantries out of the way, they sat in silence for a few minutes before Midoriya spoke up again. You must have gotten better offers than Manuel. Why'd you choose him? It was a combination of things. Tenya didn't bother to hide the irritation in his voice, hoping to stop the conversation from continuing in that direction. Midoriya stared into his lap, struggling to best phrase his next statement. It's just interesting. Ingenium's little brother, interning in the same city where his brother was stabbed. Is he implying what I think he is? How would he know about that? Your point? I think it's a terrible idea, but I assume you don't need me to tell you that? Midoriya took a deep breath before finishing. I hope you don't find him. For your sake. Tenya glared at him. That's not an option. I have to avenge my brother. The rest of the train ride passed in silence. This just got a lot more complicated than I was expecting. Iida's trying to track down the hero killer, and he might just be stubborn enough to find him. And if he did, he'd end up getting himself killed. Stain would probably view his desire for vengeance as worthy of death, ignoring the fact that he's a grieving teenager. I need to make sure it doesn't come to that. As the train came into Hosu, Izuku went over his goals for the week. Make sure no one dies. He had justified his decision to join the league by promising to keep them in check. This would be a perfect test to see if that was possible. Find Stain. That was his mission after all. To find the hero killer so that the League of Villains could recruit him. He imagined there would be consequences if he failed his first mission. Learn about how heroes operate, know thine enemy, and all that. As much as Izuku had studied heroes, he was confident that working from the inside would give him some useful information he hadn't been able to learn before. Since Izuku and Iida were going to the same place, they walked there together, pointedly not speaking to each other. Izuku wasn't sure how to restart the conversation after what he had said on the train, and Iida didn't seem to have anything to say to him either. When they reached Manuel's agency, the hero was there to greet them personally. You must be our interns this week. Iida and Midoriya, right? Iida nodded. Yes, sir. I am greatly looking forward to learning from you this week. Midoriya stopped himself from cringing at Iida's obviously forced enthusiasm as Manuel gave a wide smile. That's the spirit. Let's drop Midoriya off with my analyst, and we can head out on a patrol. Izuku was quickly introduced to Manuel's analyst, and while the two heroes got ready for their patrol, the man explained to Izuku how they typically worked with heroes. They were essentially on standby until the heroes needed them, so he continued to explain things throughout the patrol, answering any questions Izuku had as well. At one point Izuku asked about where and when other heroes patrolled and received a map of hero patrol routes. All in all, it was a productive few hours. After they let him go for the day, Izuku looked at the map he was given. Let's see, a few upcoming hero patrols pass through this area, so if I were to release the bugs from here, I could keep an eye on all of them at once. If Stain goes after one of them, I'll be able to find him. He set himself up in a cafe as he watched the patrols of all the heroes who passed through his bugs range. The sun had begun to set when he got lucky. The hero Logi noticed movement out of the corner of his eye and tried to dodge away, but not fast enough as a hand grabbed him and pulled him into a nearby alley. By the time the bug caught up, he was on the ground with the hero killer standing over him. Izuku immediately ordered the bugs to return, stowed his computer, and hurried out of the cafe. He ran toward where the attack happened, his bugs catching up to him as he did so. But when he reached the alley, Stain was gone. Izuku glanced down at the fallen hero. I hope he's alright, but there's nothing I could have done here. Now think, where would Stain go? Where would be a good place to hide? He looked around before raising his eyes upward. The roofs. There was a fire escape in the alley, and Izuku climbed it as quickly as he could, hoping it was the right rooftop, not thinking about how much danger he would be in if it was. Hitoshi finally had a chance of achieving his dream, and he wasn't about to blow it. So, he arrived at UA 15 minutes earlier than he needed to and leaned against the front gate to wait for Eraserhead. He straightened his posture as soon as he saw the hero approach. Good morning, Eraserhead-sensei. Eraserhead waved at him dismissively. No need for pleasantries, just call me Aizawa. He kept walking, and Hitoshi followed after him. Let's see, you're already in exercise clothes so we can go straight to the physical tests. Obviously, being a hero is a very physical job, and no matter how powerful your quirk is, it won't make up for being out of shape. Checking to make sure Hitoshi was paying attention, Aizawa continued. I gave these tests to my class on the first day of school, and the person with the lowest score was expelled. If you can't beat their score, you don't deserve to take their spot. Got it? A confident smile stretched across Hitoshi's face. Got it? No way is something like that stopping me. Time for all that training with Midoriya to pay off. Gunhead's personality was a lot more bubbly than Ochako had expected. He had picked her up from the train station and was talking to her excitedly about what the week would entail. I actually don't patrol as much as most heroes. I'm more focused on helping out other heroes and teaching them some sweet martial arts moves. You probably knew that though, in fact, that's why you chose me, isn't it? Ochako nodded. Yes, sir. No need to call me sir. Gunhead interrupted. Gunhead's fine. Or just Gun. Anyways, keep going. Holding back a laugh at his energy, Ochako continued. A lot of my classmates are much better than me in a fight, so this seemed like a good chance to catch up. Not to mention a week of martial arts lessons sounds a lot more chill than some of the other options. I get that I'm training to become a hero, but I've had more than enough excitement recently. How the hell is this supposed to help me get stronger? Katsuki had chosen to intern at Best Genist because if anyone knew how to be the best, it would be a hero who had made it to the top 5. He had been hoping that the hero would be able to show him what was holding him back from being the undisputed champion of his class, what was turning him into a useless failure. Instead, Best Genist was doing his hair and lecturing him on his behavior. Strength isn't the only thing that matters. And even if it were, you seem to be doing quite well in that category. You did win the sports festival after all. If his arms weren't held down by fibers, Katsuki would have attacked the hero at that. That doesn't count. Half and Half didn't give it everything he had. He didn't think I was worthy of that. Either of us could still be number 1. But it's obviously him. Best Genist shook his head. I'd say that's his fault for not taking the competition seriously. But either way, it doesn't matter which of you is stronger. The hero sighed. Let me put it this way, why did you choose to intern with me? Because you're strong? Katsuki scoffed. Obviously. So, you acknowledge my strength? As Katsuki nodded, Best Jeanist continued. But even I'm not number one. I doubt I ever will be. What's that got to do with this? Katsuki snapped. Of course you're not as strong as All Might, get to the fucking point. Best Jeanist let out a deep sigh. That was the point. Even though I'm not the absolute best, I'm still impressive. That applies to you too. Your drive to be the best you can be is good, but comparing yourself to the people around you is going to help no one. You don't need to be the best, just your best. You might not be ready to understand that just yet, but I hope you try to keep it in mind. Tenya was looking around warily on his patrol, double-checking every alley, making sure every shadow was just a shadow, when Manuel spoke to him. I'm surprised you chose my agency. You must have had better offers than mine. Tenya gave him the answer he had started rehearsing as soon as he got to Hosu. Even if you aren't as well known as other heroes, you do good work and are an admirably by-the-book hero. You seemed like a smart choice to pick up the basics of hero work. Manuel thanked Tenya for the compliment and returned to focusing on his patrol. Tenya returned to searching every alleyway for the hero killer. Where you monster? Izuku reached the top of the fire escape, and sure enough, there was Stain. Izuku walked towards him and called out. Hero killer Stain. I'm from the League of Villains, and I dash. As Izuku spoke, the hero killer turned around and threw a knife at him. Izuku was too slow to dodge it completely, and it nicked his side before landing on the edge of the roof. He gasped as he felt the knife draw blood, realizing just how out of his depth he was. What was I thinking going after him like this? I even told Iida how stupid it was to try and find the hero killer, but here I am doing the exact same thing. The hero killer didn't give Izuku much time to think, however, as he quickly rushed him, sword in hand. As he swung, Izuku quickly stepped out of range, desperately trying to make a plan. How do I survive this? I have no idea what his quirk is, and he's armed. I need something to even the odds. The knife. As the hero killer kept attacking, Izuku kept dodging back, maneuvering his way toward the knife he had thrown before. Before long he felt the railing behind him and, dropping under the hero killer's swing, grabbed the knife and stabbed at him. The hero killer caught Izuku's hand before the stab could connect. Well, it was worth a shot. Then the hero killer did something unexpected. He pulled the knife towards him and licked the blade. Immediately, Izuku felt his entire body freeze up. He must have some sort of paralysis quirk. Does he have to lick the person's blood? Why am I analyzing this? It doesn't matter what the details of his quirk are, I'm dead. The hero killer raised his sword, and Izuku braced himself. The swing never came, the hero killer instead returning the sword to his sheath. That was an admirable attempt. You've proven yourself worthy of my time. Now, what did you come here to tell me? That was a test? Of course it was a test, it never would have been that close if he tried his hardest. Breathing deeply to try and calm himself, Izuku explained why he was there. I'm with the League of Villains. They're the ones who attacked the USJ a month ago. They're looking to expand their numbers, and so I was sent to find you and set up a meeting between you and their leader. The hero killer paused before responding. Very well. I accept your offer. You have someone who can teleport, correct? Tell them to meet me on this roof in 2 days at 1600 hours. With that, he turned to leave, looking back at Izuku for one final remark. I'm surprised they managed to recruit you. In a more just society, you would have made a great hero. Wait. Izuku sprang to his feet. I can move again. Does his quirk have a time limit, or did he release me? Stop that. Analyze his quirk later. What did you mean by that? Stain stopped and turned back to him. I watched your performance at the sports festival. I saw your cleverness, your skill, your determination. The only thing you didn't have was the thing this glory-blind society has decided trumps all else. But that doesn't matter. And then Stain said what Izuku had been desperate to hear his whole life. You have everything it takes to be a hero, but no one else is willing to see that. Before Izuku could respond, Stain leaped away, leaving the boy alone on the rooftop. Once Stain had gone, Izuku fell to his knees. He thinks I could have been a hero. Someone finally believes I could have been a hero.